I guess let's call the meeting to order. We have a quorum and Natasha's on the phone. Wendy sent her regrets. She's not going to be able to make it. Kirsten is not able to. Kim is not able to. And who does that leave us with missing just offhand? That's
Councillor Kale.
Kale, right?
That's
Is that it? Oh, okay.
it. Helen.
Oh, and Helen's at the Community Economic Development course.
SFU.
At SFU.
Jeremy.
Yes, great. Okay, do we have late items? We have
one late item, which is the action items. The minutes from the last meeting are not done yet, but I went into about the action items this morning.
Okay, so we can cross off to be provided as a late item. For the
Yeah,
minutes
cross
then.
that off. That was hopeful.
So we cross off the minutes, deferred.
okay.
So just the one late item is action. The action
What am I
items,
doing this one?
which is a
4.1
supplementary material.
I have one more. Can we change the name on the agenda to Community Economic Development Committee?
Yes.
These are all being put into the
I know.
software before the change.
And the same with the, I don't know how you change it on agenda notes, but it still comes up as economic.
It's the same program.
Okay.
Okay, so then anything else? Looks like we've got the main points on there to me.
I'll move the adoption of the agenda as amended.
All in favor? There we go. Thank you. And the minutes of our September 15th meeting.
We took those off because they're not done.
We're not going to do it.
I'll
yeah.
second Allison's motion.
Oh, thank you, good morning. Then, Joan, would you, as our member of the public and chair of Tourism Bowen, why don't you just sit up at the end of the table with us and you can spread out. And we've got you on our agenda as part of the discussion, so I don't think we have any other public comments this morning.
Did you get an agenda, Joan?
Shall we review our action items then?
Sure.
Okay. Can you walk us through that?
I did mine.
Yeah, so the discuss tourism Bowen on a membership on the committee with Marie Atherton at your next meeting, Councilor Morris.
I did that.
Done.
Joan's here.
Here she is, you did it. Yay! Helen, reach out, you're all over this. Reach out to the new TBI chair, Helen did that. Helen sent the committee the draft work plan for comments, I believe that's in
She did
place.
that.
Councillor Morse and Stef clarify process of a CEDC recommendation to council for their September 30th meeting. Figure out work plan recommendation process. My work on that was I touched base with Daniel, who is the department that our money will be coming out of. So the managers are in the budget process. I asked him to make sure, can you please advocate for us getting a similar amount? He said he would. So today, if we can, I've put as an item the work plan and budget. If we can come up, rough out some numbers and put a recommendation to council, that would be helpful.
For our next budget?
For our next budget, yeah.
So this is related to the contribution to the CEDC program? Or is it?
Our budget.
Our general budget?
Yeah, because they're in the middle of putting their department budgets together.
Is
So
there,
we can say number 4 was done because the work plan was approved at
yeah.
September 30th.
Well, this is about Helen's work plan,
Yeah,
right, September 30th.
yeah.
So I think that's done.
It's done because
So,
they went to council. And, yeah.
Sorry, I went off yours there. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't believe Helen has contacted Community Futures again. I'll leave that on there.
Yeah, but that was the person that we talked about that had
Yeah.
finished up. Yeah.
Vaune set up a working group and invited Natasha, talk about health and wellness. Nailed it.
Oh, well done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that seemed to go pretty well. We got a pretty large list together, as you guys might have seen. And
Natasha, sorry to interrupt, but we've got that on early in our agenda here.
Later.
Okay.
We'll just tick off the action item for now.
Oh, I guess Natasha doesn't have the action items.
Oh, right,
yeah.
okay, so keep reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so June 14th, ongoing, these are ongoing, the business working group, send notes to Stef, nailed it. The next one's ongoing, the digital working group, that's just gonna be a little bit more work than we have the resources for right now. And long-term action, public toilets, well, we can probably engage, that's in the December agenda, so we can engage Joan with that. Ongoing, done.
Terrific, thank you, Stef. So just for clarification then, so the action items we have from our previous meetings that we're just rolling forward, we're keeping on there. That's what we're gonna do,
Except for number 1,
except for,
on July 12th, because that was done, right?
yeah. Yeah, okay, perfect. Great, well, let's talk about tourism.
Okay.
We've been trying to, no, that's not a good word. We've been excited to talk about tourism for a while, and so we're looking forward to this. And unfortunately, as you know with Helen, she's not able to make this discussion, but we look forward to more discussion.
Yes, yes, I know, I do. Thank you very much for inviting me to join your meeting this morning, and I really appreciate this opportunity to sort of have a quick chat about tourism on Bowen Island and answer any questions, if I can, that you may have at this point. We are a small organization, as you are well aware. Tourism on Bowen Island is about 4 years old in terms of being an actual thing on Bowen Island. So we do two things. We run the Visitors Center, which is on Cardina Road. We have a small kiosk that we haul out to capture all the traffic coming off the ferry so that they don't wander off and not enjoy everything that they came to see on Bowen Island, particularly our tourism-related businesses, because it's so important that we support them. And then we certainly direct them off onto whatever activities they were looking to do and remind them about how you get back on the ferry and all of those other questions and which buses you can take to get to various places on the island. We have a part-time staff, one full part-time staff during the year, and then we hire some students in the summer to assist with direction and fact-finding and so on. Yeah.
Is that a full year position?
For our one person, yeah, but it is
Okay.
part-time.
Yes.
Okay.
That's Jody, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
Jody, right, who does an amazingly wonderful job, given the limitations that we have as a small organization. So over the last several months, we've been going through sort of a renewal process and looking at where we're at and where we can go. The recent short-term rental draft policy that's been brought forward to council, we're certainly in support in general on it. Obviously, there's some issues around it, but we would like to do what we can to help with that as a tourism organization, and certainly support council's looking at the MRDT, the tax, to support both tourism and affordable or accessible housing or attainable housing, depending on how you want to phrase it, on Bowen Island, because those things are very important to our residents. We're certainly aware of that. Tourism, of course, as you probably mostly are aware, is growing on Bowen Island. We can only capture the people we talk to, that we capture at the kiosk or at the visitor center. So, but our numbers are growing every year, and it's significant growth of people that come to Bowen Island to enjoy what we have to offer here. So that's a big issue to manage. And one of the things that Tourism Bowen Island wants to be working on always is making sure that we manage this destination well, that we provide our visitors with a really good experience, that they're given accurate information when they come, that we direct them to enjoy our island safely, stay on the paths, and help them enjoy what they, and direct them to where our shops and services are as well. That's really important to us. Destination management is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, not only on somewhere like Bowen Island, but around the world. And we want to be careful that we don't become an unmanageable thing, which is happening in lots of locations, as close as North Vancouver, for example. You've probably all heard about Quarry Rock. So I went yesterday actually with a friend, because I hadn't done, I lived in North Van forever. Did Quarry Rock daily forever, just me. Now, it's just like a nose-to-tail horseback ride, you know, everybody's just stomping up the path.
Like Everest in May.
Although without the dead bodies, so, which I thought was a bonus. But it's, you know, so we want to be careful that we and they've had to really put in a lot of work to manage that destination. So we want to make sure that we do the best we can for both our residents and our tourist-related businesses, and for the visitors coming to good old Happy Isle. So we want to make sure that that's what we're on top of. So we're partners with Destination BC, which is the overarching tourism program in the province, and they support us with some funding for operations and some funding for marketing. So that supports the print materials we develop, as well as the website and training for our staff, because they offer some assistance with that. We're supported by the municipality with an operating grant, which we are dearly grateful for. And we also have members, and we charge them a fee to be members of Tourism Bowen, and they're all the tourism-related businesses. And then we have an advertising component for our print materials, which offset the cost of printing, so that we can make sure that people have accurate information when they come to Bowen Island with maps and information. So that's where we're kind of at. Any other questions off the top? You're all pretty much familiar with this, I'm sure.
Well, it's great to have an overview.
Yes.
For sure, to have those ideas. One of the things that popped out to me, the discussion that's been had around this table, without really any action items, is wayfinding. And so that's one topic that you touched on that I think has come across our radar screen, so it'd be interesting to follow up in that regard.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, just to summarize, you know, some key related to economic development, community economic development, the short-term rental, and your I guess you'd call it advocacy or input on behalf of, you know, tourism and with regards to that, and potential accommodation tax.
And that's a big agenda item for today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So with membership fees, so I'd be interested to know a sense of how many of the accommodation providers or other tourism businesses, like, because this is part of, I think, what Helen will be following up on as well, is, you know, what percentage are members, and, you know, and how does that look in terms of the overall picture on Bowen Island?
Of course. At this point, we have between 70 and 75 members annually, and I think that covers pretty much everybody who's in sort of tourism.
Anybody that's in the brochure
Yep.
as a member, correct?
Yes, yeah.
So
So it's almost everyone, I believe, but again, as the business licensing process continues, you know, we may have missed people. We try not to.
Yeah.
You know, it's to everyone's benefit. So yeah, that's about where we're at this point. And most people renew every year, so that's great.
I had a question on numbers, and it just occurred to me. It would be interesting to compare the numbers of people going through the visitor center with Crippen Park's numbers on people going through the park. Because they've got that, you know, I mean, sometimes people going through the park are, I think they have a way of trying to figure out what's visitors and what's residents, but I can't remember.
If you got a dog, you're a resident.
The what?
If you got a dog, you're a resident.
Oh, is that how they?
How do they count them?
Well, there's little counter things, so as you walk by, it'll count you.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah,
where?
trail counters.
Where?
Is it just at the main one on Cardenas?
No,
or
I
is it
think
other
they move them around in my
Oh, is that
recollection.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, no, we haven't, we've never, as far as I know, we've never had access
Well,
to that.
no,
So
it's
interesting.
in the parks,
Their world, right?
Metro Parks, of which Maureen sits on the Metro Parks Committee, but I just thought that would just be an interesting.
Absolutely. The other piece we're trying to, and we're forever asking BC Ferries, is to give us a count of people who have the experience card versus not, because the nots are more likely.
I've got some of that data from before.
Yeah.
It's a special run they have to do, but roughly 86, high 80% of the people that ride the ferry use an experience.
Yes, I mean, we.
And there was a study done when we were doing the National Park Review, and somebody tried to estimate the number of visitors versus full, you know,
Would-
true
would-
visitors,
Would
yeah.
the Ferry Advisory Committee be helpful in helping?
We've asked,
You have?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Have you asked recently? 'Cause
Yes,
okay.
just last week.
Perfect.
Yeah, so and it's one of those things, because we need to know that too.
Yeah.
Because, we want to be able to be accurate in what we're looking at and how we develop programs.
They're meeting on November 4th.
Yeah.
Well, they have to ask BC Ferries, and BC
Yeah.
Ferries has to.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And they're meeting BC Ferries on November 4th.
The Crippen data is quite substantially more than tourism. Their estimate is 290,000, and the percentage increase is 4.5% over 2017. And it's been pretty steady growth. Most of the regional parks have seen significant growth over the last 5 years in particular.
Mhm.
And part of the explanation that's being offered is that as, well, one, just straight population growth, but also people are living in families or living in smaller
Yeah.
spaces. And there is just more demand for access to
Yes.
green space.
Yeah.
And the park management strategies, and that's my question, relates to tourism management strategies. What are they? The park management strategies have to do with things like not providing a parking lot, providing a shuttle bus, actually physically closing the parks. Quarry Park, there's
Mhm.
consideration of simply closing the park, not for the long term, but just, if, well, for example,
You're talking about
Belcara,
Quarry Rock and North Van, Quarry
Yeah,
Rock,
yeah.
yeah.
Belcara,
Mhm.
and that's actually a municipal decision.
Yeah.
Belcara, they close the road in
Mhm.
at 9:30 in the morning
Yeah.
because the park is full.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's tremendous impact on the park system, absolutely, yeah.
We've asked this before, and I think it's difficult, but it would be interesting to see if we could get a sense of revenue that tourism brings to the island.
Mhm.
One way of possibly doing that would be to ask particular businesses to just track their monthlies.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't think we can ask them for money, or, how much money did you make,
Yeah.
what percentage of changes, and
Yeah.
that might be an interesting
And
metric.
that's certainly one of the things on our radar to do as well, because I don't think we've done that in.
I think it's almost, it's from an anecdotal perspective, if you go into a restaurant in the winter versus going to
Yes.
a restaurant in July.
Right.
Yeah, and certainly we want to encourage people to come to Bowen all year long,
Yes.
not just the summer
Yeah.
months. And we are finding, just anecdotally, people coming all year round. You can see it.
Well, a nice day like today.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be
It's
busy
all of a
today.
sudden short haul,
Yeah.
easy trip to do.
Yeah, so, and those are the issues we're looking at, is how we extend the tourism season effectively on the island, and how we manage the summer so that it doesn't become one of those big issues.
What are your ideas for managing the summer?
Parts of it is, it's really challenging, because we don't have a drawbridge, and so we can't pull it up. We do have a limiting factor on the ferry, that, it runs so many times a day, and it only takes so many passengers, so in a sense, we have a self-limiting feature on the ferry. And again, it's more about, in the summer, we pull back on a lot of our advertising and so on, and that kind of push, and ramp it up starting in September, October, so that we are pushing more that season, so we're not pushing the summer season as much as later in the year. So that's parts of it. We can't stop people from coming here, but again, there's some infrastructure that we need on Bowen to accommodate people better. Public washrooms is always one, always. A water fountain or two would be helpful on the island, because there's nowhere to get.
Or a water bottle refill
Yes,
station.
a water bottle refill station, that type of thing, just that, some of that infrastructure addition would really ease sort of that panic when people get here, because if they've never been here, they don't know where things are, right? So that's part of it, and again, it's really about managing the flow of traffic during the summer as best we can, so that we encourage people to take different times of ferries, but they don't all end up at the 4:30 or whatever, so that they spread them out through the day. So that's parts. There's a lot of things, and we're working with Destination BC on some of these issues as well, so that we get information from them, because they're the experts across the board for the province, and looking at them for some advice as we go forward, that we can bring forward to the municipality and to this community.
One of the things we bantered around and not formally acted on, but is getting a group of hospitality businesses together in, let's say, February or maybe end of January, and just debrief the year prior. What worked, what didn't, what can we do better?
Yeah.
Because I believe we have to, we may see ourselves as separate businesses, but visitors see us as one entity.
Yeah, exactly.
And we may be able to get some
Good feedback.
good
Yeah.
feedback on that, and, you
So
know.
that would
another
be-
business engagement? One of our business
Yeah,
engagement?
like-
I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
think
we-
that'd be great.
Work with TBI to do a
Yeah.
tourism
Yeah,
engagement.
we could
host
join,
something
do a
like that,
joint,
and- Yeah, joint, and so that
and,
we all hear the same story at once, I think that would be ideal.
yes. But I think for it to be meaningful, it would have to happen in the depths of
Oh,
winter,
yeah.
so we could prepare for the coming season.
Exactly.
You might know
Well, and
on
the other part
yeah.
of that is that we were hoping to get a lot of the accommodation providers there,
Mm-hmm.
but because it's still, you know, with the municipal review going on, you know, it's a bit touchy, like we don't want to wade into something that is already being, you know, there's a process in place.
Well, we
and-
can talk when Emma comes about where she is timeline-wise with the short-term rentals, but
Yeah.
there's certainly nothing wrong with maybe trying to get what I'll call the storefront tourism businesses
Exactly.
together.
Yeah.
The restaurants and the people, just the people in the Cove and Artisan Square, the galleries.
Well, we've done that somewhat.
Not focusing
On
on
focusing
specifically
on
this
Right.
tourist season.
Tourist
Mhm.
season.
Well, that's a question about how, you know, how
Yeah,
and when
and-
we engage the accommodation providers, because
Mhm.
there could be a lot of them, obviously.
Yeah, but they're almost a separate group.
Yeah, yeah, they have their own, I mean, in part, but separate at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Ed's thinking about is the group
Yes.
up the strip.
Yes.
And everybody that sort of deals with
Yeah.
the walking, the tourists, but the accommodation is, I think we have to fit in
That's,
with.
yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
With
just
Emma's
on our-
and a totally separate session.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be glad to, you
And they
know,
won't
just
do a
talk to
breakfast
tourism
session.
on that. I'm also on the Arts Council Board,
Mhm, mhm.
and they're also very interested in this also. So
Yeah,
we could maybe
exactly.
do something between
Three
three
groups.
groups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, no, I think that would be an ideal situation, that sounds great, thank you.
Do we have a topic for our next business summit? Would this be?
It's
a
on the
potential?
agenda.
So this is
let's-
kind of bleaching into that,
Mhm.
because
Because
that,
the timing would work.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
Is the business summit on the agenda?
The next,
Right, there too. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Maureen.
we had originally talked about end of November for tourism businesses
Yes, we did.
and accommodation providers.
Split it into two.
But we'll split it into two,
Mhm.
and,
I think the end of November is a good time frame because some of them may just close for January
Yeah.
and go away.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what you're just talking about, this meeting.
yes.
Yeah, okay, so not January, February, January, November.
Well, I was thinking
Anyways, do we
January,
want
February.
to, should,
Can we talk about that?
we'll talk
some
about
other
that
time,
there.
maybe flesh it out a bit?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, we appreciate that.
Are you gonna stay?
If I can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
please do.
public,
Yeah.
basically put me on the committee and then I'll be here all the time. I'll be sick of it. But I'm curious to, you know,
No,
we
stay
want
put.
to mesh well with all the other businesses on the island, so. thank
When
you
is
very much.
council's decision around that?
On Tuesday.
Oh, on Tuesday, great.
Council meeting.
So Natasha, you're up?
Natasha, are you able to hear fine? Like, have you heard Joan and so on?
Yeah, I can hear you guys pretty good.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, obviously Rod and Vaune, I want to include all you guys in this discussion. You know, couldn't have done it without your help. Yeah, so we got together a couple weeks ago. We put together a pretty comprehensive list of health and wellness people on the island, and it was basically alternative practitioners, more allopathic practitioners, people who provide home care service, yoga and health and wellness-based yoga B&Bs, and yeah, they were able to put together a really beautiful flyer for us, and I've spoken to some friends about that time and date, and it's sounding like a pretty good time for a lot of people, because, you know, they're done their classes, they're done their guests, and it's easy to get that time off during the day usually.
Oh, that's interesting. Did you see the email that Edward,
Yeah,
responded to?
Yeah, what's our registration right now for that? The last registration we had 3 people plus Lorinda and us. And the 3 people were the Health Center Foundation.
Oh, dear.
So I said, ooh. So, because Sherry is on the Health Center, she said Colleen has an amazing master list. So I probably jumped the gun on this. I didn't know about this meeting at all that you guys had. So I asked Colleen to send out,
That's what you get for missing a meeting.
yeah, I know, a flyer, and I've gotten back 8 responses, I think 7 or 8 responses saying, very interested. We're healthcare providers. We cannot do it at 10:30. Could we do it in the evenings?
Yeah.
Or could we do it
First thing in
breakfast?
the morning.
So, I'm sensing you went out to the wellness people, the yoga people. This went out to doctors, chiropractors, massage therapists, et cetera, et cetera. So, we have 2 issues to deal with.
The registration now is 7,
Counting who?
including me,
Okay.
Yvonne,
Well, the non-us.
Tim, Colleen, Bill, Lorinda, and Sandy Logan.
Okay. And
I
Tim, Maureen, Colleen, and Bill are Health Center
Yeah.
Foundation.
I've just been getting things done
Yeah.
quite box ticky.
Mhm.
There can be phone calls and conversations. I
Okay.
talked to Alicia, the Ruddy,
Okay.
she's interested. There's another layer of
But if she works at the Ruddy, she can't come during the day.
Alicia Hoppenrath,
Oh,
massage
okay.
therapist.
Do you know, I didn't know that list, that your latest list you sent, if the, you know, the new clinic that just opened in,
Yeah, there's-
Underneath the pharmacy?
Sorry?
Yeah, beneath the
I
pharmacy.
think it's under the pharmacy
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
There's what, 4 or 5
Yeah, they
operating
had
out
a
of
big
there?
ad in the paper.
Do you know if they were on that list?
They're on Colleen's list.
I can.
Oh, they are, okay, great.
Yeah, they are.
And I sent those to you also, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's
I
all
have
those people
4 of
who
those.
received that then?
Yes, so
Okay.
about 30 people received
Oh,
this.
great, okay.
And the feedback was very interesting, but we can't make it.
So the yoga teachers they teach yoga at 9 o'clock. That's across the board.
Okay.
Why don't we do an early one like we did for like an 8 a.m. or something?
We did for the contractors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do breakfast, we do coffee like they said, right? We don't need all that, just
Well, coffee and muffins or something.
whatever.
Yeah.
Or, this is kind of a late change. I've gotten the emails that I've gotten because Maureen said Edward Walkman, blah, 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 and my email was on there, have been very polite and interested. And the ones that people who've said they're unable to come have been very polite and interested.
Yeah,
I'm thinking we run this at
we
this
have
time.
to go ahead, because when is it, next week?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have another one at a different time. And I can actually go back to this organization, because this is a powerful list she has.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I can say, thank you for your feedback. We're going to go ahead with this meeting here, and we will have another one, another engagement meeting. And I might even ask, you know, what would be better, morning or evening? And engage them that way to begin with, because actually, if engagement is something we wanted to do, my little faux pas has gotten them engaged. So I think we could leverage this.
Yeah.
Now, it is 2 weeks away, not, it's
It's
Why-
on the
I-
it's a
24th.
week next
Oh,
Thursday.
yeah.
I think we should try and get some information from some of these people now and change it. I don't think it
Yeah.
takes anything to send an email, a nice big, banner that says, Health and Wellness Business Engagement Meeting change to
Change of time,
8
not
a.m.
change
or
of
Change
day.
of time.
6
Yeah.
p.m. or whatever. And, if we kind of knew, somehow got that info, we thought, yeah, okay, it's gonna work for some people. Because I think that's We need practitioners and people there.
Yes.
Maybe it's just about
Yeah.
focusing the group then, because if you, like, if the yoga teachers are teaching at 9 AM and 7 PM, say, that's a lot of what the schedule of the well is anyway.
Well, then 5 o'clock at night would be
So-
perfect.
Yeah, I guess. What do you think, Natasha?
I think evening could be good as well too. And yeah, definitely to get the practitioners who do regular 9 to 5 hours. I mean, it was so hard to pick a time for a wide group of people. I just threw something out there, but if you guys have feedback about what would already work for a majority of people, I'm not attached to the time.
It's gonna be tough to get an evening spot
Okay.
here. It's, check the, do you want me to check the calendar?
Oh.
Well, and I originally thought we were gonna get a big group, like this is quite a large group of people.
Yeah, but we can hold 50 people in here.
So these haven't been, like I said, I just sent out an email, so that's usually
Yeah, I
it's a bit
haven't-
more relationship building. These, I put one at Artisan Square, and I was
Yeah.
asking my lovely volunteers, you could do the general store,
But
and you could
but
do the
if we're gonna
library.
change the
I'll do the
time, we
school.
need
You
to
do the
change.
school, thank you.
Staff, if we're gonna change the time, we need to, don't
Sorry,
have
that's
that.
just,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I could take some flyers out to the back of the island when I come back after my talk.
Thank you.
I'll take them home with me and put them on the mailbox on the way home, Natasha.
But are we going to change the time?
Probably, I'm just sort of talking about the
Okay.
next steps,
Okay.
as far as promoting, Mom's thing, she wants a bigger group.
My apologies for throwing this wrench in, but I think it's.
No, I'm glad you
There's
did,
some
that was really
positive,
good, yeah.
um,
Okay, so what, we're talking about October 24th, right?
Mhm.
So, we have a Kobe water meeting at 4.
That's on the 23rd, isn't it?
23rd, yeah. Fire hall, yep, 24th evening is free.
Yeah, so from 5 PM on? I mean, I've, sometimes, when I've had some meetings with some of those people, they finish work at 4:30 or 5.
yes,
If you said something for 5:15,
So then we're at
Then-
dinner, right?
no, you're not. They can have the meeting and then go home and have dinner.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going home, or they're trying to cram in dinner to get back here for 7
Yes.
o'clock,
Okay.
and,
Yeah.
which is not something.
yeah, so we want to say 5:15, 5:30, is that, and what do we?
Or the other option
Yeah.
is 8 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
or something. So,
I think,
What about morning?
What's that?
Maybe morning?
well, I just know whenever I've had a meeting with Dr. Schugel, she's wanted it at 5 o'clock.
yeah,
They're
I'd
sort
say
of
the
finished and
afternoon.
before they
Okay.
go home, so they can go home and,
yes,
So we're changing this to 5:30.
yes, 5:30. I will get back,
let's say 5:15.
5:15, that's good,
And
split the difference, that's
they
good.
can come a little late if they.
Oh,
Oh, hello. What was that? Natasha, are you still there?
Yeah, sir, just give me 1 second. My car is trying to pick up the conversation here. Let me just get it back. Sorry, I can hear you now. Do you mind repeating that?
We're gonna change the time of the session to 5:30 PM on
5:15.
Sorry,
5:15, yeah. Yeah, I think that's good.
I will get back to Colleen, and, and tell her, and then I will get back to the people who've responded to me and thank them profusely for their input and acknowledge that we're changing it for them, see if that gives them a little impetus to be here.
So we can resend out to Colleen's list,
Yes, I
a
think
new
so.
flyer, so we can just get a new flyer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or we can just change the date of now.
That's what I need.
I might see if I can get that happening right now,
Mm-hmm.
and, so we can hand it out to you guys.
Okay.
Great, and then, Ed, have you already shared that list with Natasha, just to cross-reference?
I will have to get permission for that.
Okay.
I will, yes.
I would, it doesn't, if there's duplications, go out.
I
Yes.
guess it doesn't matter.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter, the more time to remind people, the
Yes.
more they might.
Yeah.
So you send it to the.
Well, no, Stef has amalgamated everything now. She's
No, but the healthcare list is probably a proprietary list.
Yeah, yeah.
People have signed up for it to only get notices from,
Colleen.
healthcare, so, asking,
Yes.
sending the notice of the event to the Healthcare Foundation and having them voluntarily send it
Yes.
on to their members
That's what we want.
is the right process.
Okay, good. Well, that's, sounds like some good
We're off.
revisions, yeah.
So we're at October 24th at 5:15 PM, right?
And then the next point we have is the agenda. You want to talk about what the agenda in more depth of the actual health and wellness event?
What are we doing for the agenda for the event, Ron? Natasha, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, we did have a few general discussions about it, also with Helen last. Kind of, what I thought could be like a good tone for things was what have been your issues in getting a business started. So kind of like what has been the issues of the past. And right now, like what are your biggest, concerns or even successes? I do also want to make this a lot about people, expressing like the ingenuity, all the things they've overcome, the support they've had with the community in order to get to where they are. So something from the past, like what it took to get their business started. Now what's going on, like what are their big struggles, what are their big successes? And then the future, like where do they want their business to go in the future, and what do they see as some obstacles for growth?
May I add to that? I think the key question is how can we help them? To help this sector. What can the CEDC do to be supportive of this sector, to et cetera, et cetera. So I think when we come out of this, there should be a list of things that we can do or consider as we're going forward for this for this sector.
Time frame is what, an hour and a half, 2 hours?
Didn't go much over an hour in the past because we were everyone's so busy.
Yeah.
And I think that should be maybe 5:15 to
Meet and greet and intro and
Yeah.
5:30 start discussing?
and then we're out of there by
I'll say
6:30?
5:15 to 6:30.
Well,
yeah.
I wonder if it might be worth it, Ed, for like you, me, Vaune, and Rod to get together and discuss the agenda, since you've been talking with that other group and you guys have probably been to more of these luncheons than I have.
Yes, I think that's an important thing
Sorry,
to
I
do.
missed that because Sophie's printing before we just made that change.
She's going to get together with Ed and Rod and
Yes, and
Dawn
Vaune,
to talk about the agenda.
yes.
Okay. Just about the list of agenda topics, I think asking the more open-ended questions that Natasha
Yes.
suggested is going to end us up with a list of things we could help them.
Maybe,
Maybe this,
but.
But the one about how we can help, so they focus
Yes.
it more
That's
on,
one of,
Yes.
yeah.
on ours.
Yes. What works,
Function,
what
not-
doesn't work, how can we, three key questions.
And did Robin say that she would help facilitate? Am I thinking that,
She did say that.
she did say that, yeah. So Robin needs to be part of our
Yeah.
agenda
And if
discussion.
not, you and I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
so
that
it
is
looks
excellent.
like there needs to be a meeting between Ed, myself, Vaune, and Rod then, right?
And
Edward.
Okay, sorry, I thought I said Robin in the beginning, all right.
well, Robin, oh, sorry.
Robin, Vaune, Edward, Natasha.
Okay, well, when I'm not driving, I'll start an email between us five.
Okay. Who's the head of this working group now that Robin is leaving the board? Or
The business engagement?
Yeah.
I don't know, Vaune,
Yeah,
are you there?
okay,
Vaune is our leader.
Vaughn
so-
is our VEP.
Yeah.
You did
Yeah.
not fast enough.
I have a question. We're doing all of these engagement sessions with different sectors. Are we asking the same questions?
That was a question I had. Fairly,
I think so. This is what we got with the tech, the home.
Yeah.
yeah.
We asked generally the
Then
same
we're gonna
questions.
get the same,
Yes.
same answers.
I think we need to approach this as a research issue, and
Mhm.
whether, as opposed to, let's all talk and share,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we need to come out with some information.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to,
And if we come up with a common theme amongst all the
Yes.
groups, then that might be a topic for the business summit.
yes,
One thing that we framed the last couple engagements with was what is community economic development? And just a quick word about, you know, we're looking at essentially sustainability of our community, you know,
Yeah.
building resilience and diversity, those core
Yeah.
concepts of community economic development to frame the discussion.
yes. The network, I thought that was very good last time.
I think we also provided information.
Yeah.
So for the, for the trades, we had information on step code and business licensing. Just a little,
Mhm.
I don't know what we can offer in this field, but
Well, the only thing we could give them would be the business license information,
was that it?
Yeah,
I think.
and you can reference that and have a handout.
Okay.
I do also remember that Helen saying that she would be able to attend the meeting as well. But that was the morning meeting. I'm not too sure, I can't speak for the evening time for her. And I'm just bringing it up because like she's a great person to talk about like what resources Bowen does have and is giving out type of thing. So I was just thinking of her as far as if there's anything that she wants to share, or also to double check if she can be a part of the afternoon one, evening one.
Okay.
Well, it's,
I can now follow up on that.
yeah.
Great. Do we want to try to set a time for us to get together right now, since we're talking?
Let's go through the agenda.
Okay.
At the end.
Okay, then Natasha, unless you have anything else to add, maybe we'll move on to our Buy and Bowen campaign item.
Nope, that's fine.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Natasha.
Welcome.
So the time of year has come to renew our relationship with the Buy Local BC. And I touched base with the communications department if we would like to, they are willing to participate in the campaign like we did last year. They are. I'm just kind of excited about it. I said, well, you know, we can't be exactly the same, and so we're excited about coming up with new ideas.
Okay.
Does the committee support this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Do you need a resolution on that?
sure, last year we did
May I just ask, what will it cost?
$500 was what we did last year.
And it's in our budget?
It would, that's coming later in the agenda. Oh, we have a budget for this year. Well, I think
Oh, yeah,
the budget
yeah.
came out so late last year. You know, we have it, we have the Buy Local campaign, winter, fall, $2,500 is on page 16.
So the question is, how much of that have we spent?
And we
Did
would have
she hang
spent $500. Oh, this isn't my spreadsheet.
We just need to include the amount of money in the resolution.
Mhm.
So this would be $500 to engage Buy Local BC, and then there would be.
What do you
the
mean
cost of
by
the
engage
undergrad.
Buy Local BC?
You have to pay $500.
Oh, to join? Oh, not to engage them, but to be part of their overall
Yeah,
campaign.
and would I be right in saying, because
Steph,
I'm
the
not
phone's
100% clear on the,
Hi, Natasha.
Sorry, that was me.
It's okay.
so I'm not 100% clear, yeah, exactly what we get and how that is funded. I mean, Buy Local BC, do they get provincial government funding to run their organization? Or are they membership funded, or how? I'm just interested to know sort of what that structure is.
Sorry,
I
I
wonder
was.
if we do know that.
I'm sorry, just on
Do they get provincial government funding, or is it membership, like are these fees, is that how Buy Local BC is funded?
There's a Buy Local BC week, BC Buy Local week,
Right,
December 2nd to 8th.
they do a
Which we
variety
ran
of larger picture things.
Yeah.
But I mean, mainly what we've done with Buy Local BC is had Facebook communication posts and advertisements in the undercurrent, isn't that essentially what we've done?
Yeah, so we ran every day of our digital communications during the Buy Local week.
Right,
Quite clever. And then we did a weekly, just during the dark months,
yeah,
like November to February, until spring break, a weekly ad. and try to tie it in with like Valentine's Day and Christmas, those kinds of things.
So essentially the cost of the program for us is the engagement of $500, staff time to produce additional creative and so on, and paying for undercurrent tests.
Yeah.
So I guess what Allison is asking is, so what is that total?
I'm just trying to find it. It was the-
So you actually have that?
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
on
yeah,
their
it's whatever.
website and they've got a communities page. So let me see, we're not on the communities page.
Well, we budgeted 2,500 because we spent that the last time we did it,
I-
right?
Yes.
But I don't know that we spent all of that because some of it would have been in 2018. Not,
Right.
Well, all that matters,
Is it,
and we've worked with them before, we don't need to check them out.
Right.
Yeah.
We know that we need to spend $500 to partner with them and to have access to their resources and so on. So really my question is, what's it gonna cost for the ads and the undercurrent? And I'm assuming that anything digital will be free. If
Right.
that $2,500 is for this calendar year and we haven't spent any of it,
Then we're fine.
okay, I've got $1,774.65 we spent in the last campaign. And
and
I
was
have had
that,
it in November, December.
and that
So
was
that was
last year.
2018. So we've got money in the bank, it looks like. I'm sorry I'm confused because they, yeah.
Yeah, but it sounds as though we'd be spending roughly 2,000 of the 2,500.
Yeah.
Yes.
That we have.
So the resolution would be something along the lines of that the committee recommend to council that Bowen Island municipality participate in the Buy Local BC campaign with expenditures up to the approved $2,500. Something like that.
So we have to ask council. I think it's in our, it's in
Well,
our
if it's in
work
our
plan and
budget,
budget.
the
We've already,
work
council's
plan.
already said we can.
Then
We
we
just
take-
want to resolve for ourselves.
So take council out of it.
Take
Okay.
notes on, but we
The
just,
council, the
Unless you think
committee,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
yeah,
So the committee resolved too.
yeah. And I mean, I would be curious to know this on the local website. There's a caption called Communities.
Mhm.
And they've got Mission, Point Grey Village, Burnaby Heights, Langley, Hastings Crossing. So if we're a member, do we automatically get on that community page?
Yeah, so I guess the community page might be a different,
Well,
on our website listing, we should.
I'm
go
in the
there.
bcbuylocal.com,
Right.
but
so-
we haven't paid for this year yet, so we wouldn't be on it.
I think that's a different.
Yeah, but we paid last year.
That's not a membership thing, that is a,
This
there's
is a
no,
renewal, they wouldn't have ripped us off.
Well, I'm on the bcbuylocal.com website.
yeah, but those aren't, like the East Village is not a entity, it's
They're
just
a
a,
community.
but there's nothing, like, if they were gonna pay,
Well, they maybe did. I don't know.
who, East Village is just a, no, it's a
Well, they may
neighborhood.
have a, they
Well,
may
it could
have
be
a,
Do you know what I mean?
Business
Because it's-
association.
business development, the business association group, yeah.
Well, could we just make that an
Yeah,
action
it's
item?
just a question I've got. I mean, I'm quite happy to follow up on it.
Mhm. Okay,
Yeah.
well, let's propose, I think Maureen's motion is what we need.
And I'll just follow up on what we get for our 500.
Yeah,
I can do that. I'll be dealing with them in order to re-engage for this year, so
I think it's better they have one.
I'll just-
Yeah, no, that's
do
why
that
but I
conversation.
wasn't sure if Steph
Yeah,
had
because
the
I don't think we
time.
actually have a membership, we just are participating in the Buy Local campaign, right?
Well, we're paying $500 to BC Buy Local Association.
I'm saying it's not my understanding that we are an ongoing member. We pay $500 to participate in the Buy Local campaign, right?
So what do we get
Correct.
for the $500?
And it says here that there's a website listing, so I would like to
Yeah.
follow up on that.
Yeah.
Allison, there's later in your agenda, there's material. Could I hear the motion again?
I'm just gonna try to not write anything.
Oh, that's exactly what I'm looking at on the website. We get a website listing, we get digital, and we get social media support.
Okay, that the committee resolved to participate in the Buy Local BC campaign up to a cost of $2,000 including a champion category membership with Buy Local BC, ongoing digital and Bowen undercurrent communications, and anything else?
Should that be
Or
2,500
no?
since we budgeted that?
Up to 2,500.
Okay,
And maybe add up to that as approved in the CEDC budget,
as approved,
or as,
In the-
as included in
in the approved,
in the approved CEDC budget.
included in the 2019, in the approved 2019 CDC budget.
Oh, yeah, so we're actually listed as one of their partners for the.
We are in
Oh,
there.
good, okay,
Okay.
Bowen Island Economic Development Committee as a partner.
okay.
Good.
Yeah. This
No,
was
that
for
was
last year,
definitely-
right?
Oh, you're on last year's.
Okay.
right?
No
Well,
follow-up
that's what
on
they
that.
had, so they're just now getting the new ones
Yeah.
for this year, right?
So how did that end?
I would like something after the end. Okay, the committee resolved to participate in the Buy Local BC campaign up to a cost of $2,500 as included in the approved 2019 CDC budget, including a champion category membership with Buy Local BC, ongoing digital and Bowen undercurrent communications, and
Or do we, or just sort of, do we just need to say that we approve buying the Champion $500 out of our budget?
well, we're also gonna be paying for Bowen undercurrent ads.
Right, but we've already said that we were gonna do that, I guess we can reaffirm that, but we've got it in our budget, we're already doing it. You're just bringing it to us because it's time to renew the membership. That's the expenditure right now that you're asking us if we would approve. Isn't it?
Yes, and I just thought it's nice to have our plan.
Yeah, we can
resolution. I'll vote on
encapsulate
this
it.
plan, What we're
Do
doing
more.
for the next,
Just,
Yeah.
why not just put "and" before the Bowen Island undercurrent and just "and" it?
okay,
Because that's, I mean, it's digital and.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I just mention that the link actually is broken to our,
Oh, no.
and
Oh,
so
it
we
just
should
took
really.
me to that, but it takes me to the website, but nothing comes up.
Exactly,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking that since we get a chance to have a link, right?
Now I gotta follow up on link, okay.
Well, it's going, you know, so it says the Economic Development Committee, but instead of sending that link to literally like our municipality website that talks about the committee, who cares?
Mhm.
Why don't we send it
Yeah.
to, something that supports the businesses here?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
a direct, I don't know, is there something like a directory or
Good question.
She's over there
Yeah.
send it our way?
Yeah.
So we list all.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so that perhaps,
Sure,
but
that's
something
a good
to read
idea.
about.
Unless there's some other.
Nobody
site.
wants to read about what our committee is. It'd be
No.
nice for them to actually.
Because
If
people are
someone
going to
actually
buy
clicked on
local,
that, it'd be nice if they could like,
see some stores and see some shops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, so, yeah, maybe a good action then is to bring, once this has happened, bring this into the committee and have us look at what has, what they've done. So I will ask them to include the TBI link, and then we can all look at it on the screen on the follow-up meetings.
Or there may be a specific page of the TBI link you want to take them
Sure, do you want to send me something?
to. Yeah.
Okay.
Thinking of the one that lists businesses or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Or track, yeah,
Yeah, rather than.
Sure.
yeah. Because it's to encourage people to
Yeah.
buy things locally, so.
So we've got two action items. One is the follow-up that Allison was thinking of doing just in terms of the overall.
Yeah, Steph's doing, yeah.
That Stef is gonna
I'll
do.
talk with Steph
Yeah,
about what I
and then
can.
this, the second action item is to Bowen and tourism. Then we have discussion, and then we have just the simple motion, which is we approve the renewal of the champion membership for $500.
And the Bowen undercurrent.
And the Bowen
has
undercurrent.
$2,000.
Okay, I'm afraid of
We lost one of our, we
Well, we've
lost our
got-
quorum here though, so.
Yeah, we've gone over, so I want to wrap that up. Can we just make that motion?
Wait for Maureen.
Yeah.
We have quorum with Natasha, are you still here?
Oh, maybe not.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Oh, good.
I just thought of something. Since we're waiting,
Yeah,
about the materials we could include with the.
okay, we're not waiting.
Yeah,
Oh,
we've
yeah.
got
Sorry,
everything.
okay, materials we can do.
What about zoning?
What about zoning?
For the health and wellness, community,
Oh, you're
zoning
right.
issues about where you can operate businesses,
Right.
that kind of thing, I think would be very useful.
Well, that's one of the, what
Information we can provide. Is that what you're saying?
Because I understand that we are going to be getting referred to us for review, something about the zoning at Nectar. I just read in.
Oh, they've applied for rezoning,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
It may
well, you know what, we've got a note on it and we'll.
Yeah, you're the leader of that group.
In our-
Sorry?
in our
You're the leader of that group, you'll be
Okay.
coming up with agendas, so. Perfect, I can make sure that we have some
Might be useful.
information. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely,
We
yeah.
talked about that
Yeah.
can be an issue for people where they operate these kind of businesses, right?
I don't want to keep Emma too long, and she's on for 10:20, so
We're like, yeah.
let's,
Well, move
let's
to
just
the-
make that, let's.
Read
make
the
our
motion, staff. I'll
I'm just
Okay.
worried that Maureen's gonna follow up on something on that.
Well, then
motion.
let's defer discussion of that motion until after Emma's
Yeah.
presentation.
Good idea.
Good. Okay, good, well, we've gone through a lot there too. Hi Emma, welcome, yes, come on.
Where do you want to sit?
There's mine.
Okay.
Is it Joan?
You can take the comfy chair around there, Joan.
Did you get my presentation? I emailed it to you super late, or else I have it on stick. Would you rather it on the stick?
It's okay, if it's here. Yeah, no, it's okay. Thank you. There is a guy in there.
Emma, do you know everyone? You've met the committee members before, Vaune and Ed and myself, and you know Tim Wolfgang,
Yeah.
Neil Wolfgang, and you know Joan? Yeah. Okay.
Does this need to be in it? Yeah. And I can proceed without Maureen, or should we wait for her?
We should go.
Yeah, I think we should go.
I'll just go tell her we're starting, so she doesn't go.
Okay, well,
I've seen this before.
Yeah. I'm just gonna give a recap of essentially what I presented to council. I'll make it brief, in case everyone's already seen it, just so we're all on the same page for the discussion. The short-term rental policy development project started back in March under council direction to engage the community and figure out an approach that was suitable and reasonable for Bowen Island. We undertook a review phase and then we engaged throughout May to August, and through the summer, staff has been preparing a draft policy for review. Oh, just there. To summarize what we found during the review phase, Bowen Island has quite a high proportion of seasonal residences. Traditionally, Bowen Island is a community with a lot of part-time residents that are also an integral part of the community. However, we've also discovered that there are a significant number of short-term rental listings. This is according to host compliance data that was taken in January of this year. There were 123 listings, and almost 90% of them were entire houses. We've also found from our island survey that lack of affordable rental housing is a top housing issue for the island. So the staff undertook a review of 22 municipalities to see how they were approaching the short-term rental situation. We found that business licensing was the top regulatory tool across almost every single municipality. And specific to those with high seasonal populations like ours, there was a special business license for those type of rentals with additional regulation. During our engagement phase, we undertook a variety of initiatives to reach a number of key stakeholder groups. As you can see here, we did everything from our information sessions to online engagement, written and email as well. From the engagement, we found that in general there's very high support for existing bed and breakfast operations, which are
currently operating in compliance with our regulations. Bed and breakfasts are allowed if they are operated by a resident of the dwelling, and we have received no complaints on bed and breakfast operations. We also had good support for moderate regulation. This is both for bed and breakfasts and for entire home short-term rentals. This is mainly, the support for regulation is to minimize or prevent the impacts on our long-term rental housing stock, as well as impacts on our neighborhoods for safety, security, and neighborhood character. There's also a lot of support for business licensing to help regulate these types of issues and to require local contact for the full duration of short-term rental operation. We received the most concerns around operation of short-term rentals in entire homes, which have potential to invite large groups that could be quite disruptive to the neighborhoods. We also had concerns around using secondary suites for short-term rentals as they were intended for long-term rental stock. So staff approached this policy with this objective to establish an approach that was still fair for short-term rental operators, but also help to mitigate negative impacts on the community. And the main considerations really is the residents' first approach. And I just want to make it clear that both the engagement results and council direction have made it very clear that short-term rentals are a very important part of Bowen Island economy, especially since we lack a lot of the regular commercial visitor accommodations such as hotels and inns. The tourism industry does depend very strongly on short-term rental stock. However, we have also heard from the community a lot of concerns around operations of short-term rentals, so we want to make sure that the regulations protect the community and the interest of the community. We are looking at requiring a business license to help regulate short-term rentals as part of this policy, and we are looking to allow short-term rental of entire homes as a seasonal rental use, and to maintain fair and What does that mean, seasonal?
Not the entire year.
Okay.
So we'll get into that a little bit more because it is a main point of confusion, it seems, with this draft policy. Yeah, so the policy will also look at maintaining fairness for existing operators that are complying with regulations, as well as viability of enforcement. The three main parts of the policy will require, will have bylaw requirements, enforcement measures, and talk about taxation. When we're talking about the bylaw requirements, we will not be changing any of the regulations currently for bed and breakfast, and we will create a new use, as mentioned, to allow short-term rentals in an entire home, and we are proposing to call this use a seasonal rental. And we will also be amending bylaws to require business licenses for short-term rentals. Under the business licensing amendments, we will ask for a good neighbor agreement for seasonal rental use, and this will include the requirement for a local contact, as well as sharing that information with your neighbors and also acknowledging other regulatory bylaws. For enforcement, we are still going to largely follow our existing enforcement policy, which is on a complaint basis. But in addition, we will also do random checks and online monitoring. We will likely subscribe to an online service for the online monitoring. And at three verified I would guess contraventions of the requirements will result in a bylaw notice. If a short-term rental operation receives 3 notices, then their license would be revoked, and they would have to wait a minimum of 2 years to apply for a new license.
Could you just repeat that again, that last bullet point?
So essentially following our traditional enforcement policy, it's complaint basis, but if the complaint were verified and there was an actual contravention of the requirements that result in a notice will be issued. A short-term rental operation that receives 3 bylaw notices will result in their license being
So that's 3
revoked.
complaints.
Sorry?
It
That's
could be 3
That
complaints.
could be 3 complaints.
3 complaints that are verified.
That's right.
And as part of the policy, we'll also be issuing an actual warning before the notice. So there will be a reasonable period for them to correct the non-compliance before a notice is even issued. So we're talking about 3 notices. If an operation is receiving 3 notices, that means they've intentionally not complied. I think the municipality is really going to try and work with the business for compliance, and issuing a notice is really a last resort.
Has there been a fine based discussion on penalties for violations?
There will be fines. The amount of the fines will be proposed once the policy is adopted. Those bylaws will have to go through all the amendment process of going back to council. So further research will be done and brought back to council to discuss different fine levels.
So right now, there's no fines, like there'd be a warning, and then the second complaint would be the first actual notice.
The current regulation?
Yeah.
The current regulation does not allow for short-term rentals.
No, according to this, you would have a complaint and a warning,
Yes.
and then 3 of these, so you would have 4 complaints.
You would have a complaint,
Yeah.
staff would then verify the complaint.
Yes.
If it is an actual
Yes.
contravention, a warning would be issued.
Okay.
And then after a compliance period, if it's still an issue, then a notice would be issued.
Oh, so you have a chance. So after a complaint does not equal a notice?
No, but 3 complaints do, don't they?
No.
3
No,
bylaws?
okay, so just a sec.
Yes.
I'm the neighbor, I phone and make a complaint about noise on July 15th. That's the first complaint that's ever gone to bylaw. So then bylaw investigates, realize there was noise, and they issue a warning.
Yes.
2 weeks later, the neighbor across the street phones
Mhm.
and issues a complaint about too many cars. The bylaw investigates, and in that case, because it's the second complaint, they issue a bylaw notice.
No, this would be per incident.
So you get a warning per incident, and if it's corrected, you get no notice.
But an incident is going to be noise or too many cars, and it happens once.
Well, I believe this is all just new, so we'll have to be
Okay.
learning as we go. But if it was a noise issue, and yes, it only really happens once, so bylaw goes, they verify, they get documentation, they get the right evidence, and they send a warning letter.
Yeah. So if we have
There's no
another
more noise
noise.
at that point, obviously, but if within a very reasonable time span, they get another noise complaint, it's also verified,
And they'd issue a warning, a notice that time.
they will likely issue a notice.
Okay, so it's not by incident, it's by type of complaint.
Type of complaint, but I think also within a reasonable time frame.
Yeah.
Say they got a noise complaint, and they didn't get another one until like 2 years later, I don't think
So
that's
the parking from, a parking issue would be a totally different complaint.
Yes.
Same property, but a total.
Different issue, so it's not
Different
incident as much
Gotcha.
as issue.
It's an issue, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is the, like when it's over the 120 days, one of these complaints?
How are you gonna verify the 120 days?
Very difficult.
But it's the same category, parking, noise, over the amount of days?
It would be a different issue, yes.
Emma, I don't think that was at all clear to council in the presentation on September the 30th. At least speaking for myself, I had assumed that it was a complaint, not a type of complaint that
Yeah.
would trigger this process. So that if somebody had a complaint about noise, a complaint about parking, a complaint about an overrun of however many days were decided on, and another complaint, that person would have met the requirements
Yeah.
of the initial warning and 3 notices. So I think that's something that you
Well, all
need
issue,
to.
when your example of all those things together, you mean they send in one letter saying, I'm complaining about what's happened
No,
tonight? Oh,
No,
but
but
different.
there's an incident with a complaint about noise, an incident
There's
with a complaint about
parking.
something
Yeah.
else, something
Yeah.
else and something else. So that it would be.
That was that's why I
Yeah,
used
that's why I
that
asked.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the short-term rental unit, not the types of bylaw infractions.
And that can be discussed.
I would like it to be, but
Yeah.
I think it needs to be foregrounded for council, because I do not think council understood that.
And I think it needs to be clear to the operator too, that it's, you know, if you get 4 complaints, then.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah,
can
that's
get
it.
those 4 with the same guests, so you can have a
Yes.
nurse complaint and an apartment complaint the same night.
Yeah, so this was the policy
Yeah,
enforcement
well,
was
maybe for
drafted
different
based
And then
on
you use
the-
common sense as a bylaw officer, right? You use common
Well-
sense to go, well, okay,
Let
I've
me-
got
let
4
me
things
just,
going on today, but this is the only one time we've ever had a complaint on this property, are you just gonna shut
Yeah,
it down?
yeah, so it's,
Probably not,
I would think it
right?
would be by the number of days, like, you could have, complain about 10 things on day 1, and then somebody else complains on day 5 about one thing.
Yeah.
But it's that there's always complaints about this particular piece of property.
But let's just clarify how we give feedback to staff. Like, so is
Clarification
this,
and
so
complaint.
we're getting clarification from you. You're giving us the presentation, we're getting clarification. But, and then what's our process for giving feedback? Are we to try to give you feedback now, or?
Yes.
Let's do a recommendation saying that we support or don't support the policy with the following comments, and you can use
Yeah.
bullets.
Right,
So just keep notes of your comments and
Yeah.
we'll make sure they're all captured.
okay.
But I just want to say the enforcement measures that are proposed based on Bowen Island's policy for enforcement, which is really to work with the community for compliance. And that's why it wasn't intended to be just based on 3 complaints and you're done. It was really, how do we resolve the complaint to give a reasonable period and measure, like, steps for the operator to resolve the complaint before issuing the notice. So the notice would be issued if it was really shown that the operator was not trying to comply.
Sorry guys, can I ask a brief question?
Sure.
I just want to, I believe it's Emma who's here visiting.
Oh, yes, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Yep, Emma,
Hi, Emma.
Island Planner.
Hi, my name's Natasha Baz. I'm a nutritionist here on Bowen and also in town. And I just want to ask really quickly, when were these bylaws written? And just curious when the bylaws were written.
Which bylaws are you referring to?
The current ones that we are all abiding by now.
The land use bylaw?
Yeah, for short-term housing and like B&Bs type thing.
So we're discussing amendments to the bylaw to allow for things like short-term rentals of homes. Other than that, bed and breakfast use of residents as a home occupation is currently regulated under the land use bylaw,
It has been
Which-
for years.
which
Okay,
has
and
always
that
been
was
allowed
written
since
how long
incorporation.
ago?
2002.
Yeah, so
2002.
it's always
Okay,
been
yeah, I
allowed
just
in the
wanted-
land use bylaw.
Okay, yeah, just curious, just to see how, current it is with all the changes that the island has undergone in the past, I guess, 17 years.
Well, that's why we're looking at changing it to try and address some of the issues that are coming up with
Great.
what's going on in
Okay.
practice versus what the land use bylaw permits.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
So I
Okay,
guess,
just get a sense of how long ago these were written.
yeah, that's a really good question, and I didn't give the planning background on that, but the land use bylaw, as adopted since incorporation, has always allowed for bed and breakfast use as a home occupation. So that means that it can only be operated by a resident of the dwelling, someone that actually is living there during the short-term rental period. Other than that, no other form of short-term rental is actually allowed in the land use bylaw.
Except in the code.
Okay, yeah, because just the one thing I was considering is, we are a bigger island and we are trying to be a little bit more of like a world destination. And I feel for like, some of these bigger centers, like Vyner and Nectar, for example, they want more avenues of income, and one of them could be serving lunch and dinner. And right now, if they're designated as B&B, they're...
No, that's a whole different, Xenia has a special retreat zoning in the land use bylaw.
Okay.
Part of the issue that I've been having with this all along, and Emma and I have been discussing this, to me, a short-term rental is a bed and breakfast, anything that's rented for less than 30 days. So in the cove, we allow something called commercial guest accommodation, which is the little cottages at the Union Steamship, for example. Those are designated as commercial guest, tourism commercial or commercial guest accommodation,
It's a different.
which is a defined category in the land use bylaw. Bed and breakfast is also, because it's for less than 30 days, you're renting a room for a short term, that's a tourist accommodation. I think using the word tourist accommodation might be a little clearer. Xenia has a special zoning for a retreat center, and what's being used by the Orchard Recovery Center right now for their accommodation for their guests has a special zoning called guest house.
Could I
Yeah.
propose?
Yes, that's okay.
Could I propose something, which is that as Stef is putting together our list of comments, that one of them be that clarity is needed on the variety of forms of accommodation.
Definitely.
Bed and breakfast, commercial guest accommodation, guest house, retreat centers, and so on. So the overall landscape of accommodation is not clear, and that's the context within which this regulation, if it comes into force, will operate. Did you get that, Steph?
I got bed and breakfast, retreat
Yeah,
center,
okay.
short-term rental.
But you
And
need
center.
the overarching first and
That clarity is needed on the variety of forms of accommodation, including.
Yeah.
So I
No, do we wanna
apologize, I
talk-
haven't provided a slide showing what we have in our current existing regulations. I can sum it up quite simply, is that for residential zoning, so lots that are zoned for residential use, single detached housing mainly, the only form of short-term rental that is currently allowed is bed and breakfast. All other types of visitor accommodation is allowed in different type of zoning. They are different uses that are not currently allowed in any residential zone. That being said, those uses could be allowed in those zones if a rezoning or a temporary use permit were granted by council. Does that make
Will you
sense?
define bed and breakfast, please?
Bed and breakfast is a home occupation that I actually do have.
The resident has to be, the owner has to be resident.
Well, the definition of home occupation means an occupation carried on by the resident of the
Yes.
property.
And there are specific
And you can only rent
regulations.
out the bedrooms, the
There's
bedrooms
specific-
cannot have facilities in them.
Kitchens.
Guys, there are notes in our package here, so all the definitions.
So this is
are
the
on page
definition
42.
in the land use bylaw without the highlighted section. It is a home occupation located in a detached dwelling or accessory building, or both, and it's restricted to providing temporary overnight accommodation and a breakfast meal to transient paying guests. We are proposing to also allow, in the draft policy, that bed and breakfast may contain limited kitchen facilities. So this is just the definition, but the land use bylaw also contains 2 pages of regulations for home occupations that apply to bed and breakfast. So that's where it comes in that a resident needs to be operating a home occupation. The floor space for a bed and breakfast is also limited, the number of bedrooms is also limited. So there's quite a number of other regulations, and that is what I'm referring to when I say the policy is not proposing to make any changes to the existing regulations for bed and breakfast. They are working, the people that are complying have not received any complaints and have received a lot of support from the community. The other types of guest accommodations are not currently allowed uses on residential properties. So the proposed new use of seasonal rental is intended as a short-term rental use on residential properties that will allow people to short-term rental their entire homes.
But there's only certain people that will be able to do that. And the maximum is 120 days.
Are you done your presentation, or? Okay, let's keep, can we keep
Okay,
going?
sorry.
think we covered the enforcement. The proposed taxation is the municipal and regional district tax program that is run by the Destination BC, the province. And we can tax up to 3% and assign that revenue to tourism and affordable housing initiatives. in
Natasha,
the
can you mute your
I'll turn
phone?
it down.
And I have had conversations with Joan. It is a lengthy application process, and Tourism Bowen Island is happy to partner with us to help support that process. So I wanted to actually go into a little bit more detail around a few points that have come up in past discussions. The 120 days, we received quite a few letters from short-term rental operators currently that feel the 120 days is unreasonable.
Sorry,
That
what
is not enough.
What's the 120 days?
Maximum number of days you can rent it out.
Oh, per year. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, the proposed seasonal rental use, this is the definition that we're proposing. This will allow you to rent your entire dwelling as a short-term rental, so that's for less than a 30-day period. And as part of this definition, we are capping the total number of days you can use your residence as a short-term rental in each calendar year. So that cap is 120 days. We're also capping the capacity to 2 guests per bedroom in the offered unit. So this came up in a lot of the feedback as being too limiting. 120 days is not enough, is what the letters said. The ones that were sent in to council when the draft policy was brought for introduction, I've just tallied them up. We got 7 letters that specifically addressed the 120 days as being too little, and out of those 7, 5 of them mainly were concerned with the seasonality, which is not actually part of the restriction at all, but may have been considered because of the name seasonal rental. The restriction to 120 days has nothing to do with an actual season. It is just a total of 120 days out of 365, whenever you choose those 120 days to be. So those 5 letters that were very concerned about not having short-term rental use available in the off-season, I think is just a misinterpretation of the definition. For the other 2, they specifically felt that 120 days was not enough. One of those specified that their average number of days rented out in a year is 210 nights a year, and that is much more than the 120 days proposed. In this case, I believe that the intent of the policy all along has been to enable our significant part-time residential population an opportunity for some additional income to help supplement housing costs. And in that case, these residences are never intended to be full-time short-term rental operations. We have several other uses in the land use bylaw that would allow for full-time short-term rental use. In those cases, they are commercial uses such as the guest house or the guest commercial accommodations, which are not allowed in residential properties for good reasons because they are residential zones meant for residential use. If a property felt that they were that they wanted to have a commercial use on the residential property, they can always apply for a rezoning. So that is still an option. Some of these letters have made it sound like they have no other options, but in the land use bylaw, you can run a commercial guest accommodation on a property if it is so zoned. You just need the right zoning. And you can go through the zoning process, have your neighbors weigh in, go through due public process, and have that use on your property. The intent of this policy is to address short-term rental use on residential properties, to maintain the residential use of the area and the neighborhood. In that case, We are proposing short-term rental use in a property where someone actually uses it for a portion of the year, not to allow for short-term rental as a commercial use for 365 days a year. The 120 days is based on 2 comparable municipalities that also have high seasonal populations. This came up during the council meeting, and unfortunately I didn't have time to prepare and I didn't have additional information. But I can tell you those 2 municipalities are Nelson and Revelstoke. And also from a recent Islands Trust memo on short-term rentals, the 120 days was also cited as a threshold where BC Assessment would consider short-term rental use above 120 days as commercial, and it would be taxed accordingly.
That's really helpful,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I agree, this information does need to be shared publicly to help with the confusion. The public open house has not yet been scheduled, and staff is purposely waiting for all the referrals from the committees to get a better understanding of all of the questions that are still out there around this proposed policy, so we can properly draft communication materials to address these questions for the public open house.
Wolfgang?
It would be very helpful to have those reasons why 120
Yeah.
would be spelled out, because it would address a lot of the comments you otherwise would.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions around that.
Sorry, let's go through the whole presentation.
Yeah, so I think that's all I had to say on the 120 days. If people have questions, please let me know at the end. The other point I wanted to bring about was the secondary suites. This was the other hot topic. Our current land use bylaw, when it was first adopted in 2002, did not allow for any secondary suites on any of the properties on Bowen Island. In 2008, council adopted an amendment to the land use bylaw to allow for secondary suites that were contained within the primary residence, so it would be an attached secondary suite. And this was explicitly to help address the need for more affordable long-term housing stock. It was contrary to our official community plan at the time in terms of increasing densities on the island. The community plan had very set expectations for density to maintain a low density development on the island. And the council of the time went contrary to this, increasing density, essentially doubling on all residential lots to allow for the secondary suites, but very, very clearly only for long-term housing, so much so that the regulations explicitly prohibit any short-term rental, specifically bed and breakfast. That's the only type of short-term rental allowed in land use bylaw. So secondary suites had come up again in 2016. Council then considered allowing detached secondary suites, so that's in a separate building. And in this case, this was adopted in 2017. And they maintained those regulations again, that secondary suites would only be allowed for long-term housing.
And if I'm not correct, doesn't the property have to be at least 1 acre?
There is a size requirement to be allowed to have a detached secondary suite, yes.
Okay. And that's still going to stay in effect with this?
Oh, there's no proposal
There's
to
no
amend
consider,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
The size of the lot is not being considered at all in this property, it's the use. It's whether or not you can use your property for a short-term rental if you have a secondary suite. So the current regulations, they do not allow short-term rental on the entire property if you have a secondary suite.
Mhm.
The policy is proposing to allow short-term rental, at least in the principal house, still not in the secondary suite. That is a very, very hot point that's very contentious right now. There are a lot of people that are submitting feedback with secondary suites that live in the main house, have no intention of using their main house for a bed and breakfast, but would like to use their secondary suite for either an entire unit rental or as a bed and breakfast where they just rent out the room.
Okay.
Which currently would be allowed, and also in the proposed policy would not be allowed.
Wait, what you would currently be allowed or not allowed? I didn't.
Currently, if you have a secondary suite, you cannot have any short-term rental on your property.
Got it.
The proposal in the policy is to allow for short-term rental in the main house,
Okay.
even if you have a secondary suite.
Okay.
The ask that we're hearing from the community after this was released is that short-term rental be allowed in the secondary suite.
Oh,
Okay.
of course, that's where it's
Regardless,
happening.
regardless of the.
That's actually where it's happening.
Yes, regardless
It's
of
happening.
the size of the lot.
Regardless of the size, there is no.
Well, it's only
limit.
the detached secondary suite
That's right.
where the 1 acre
Right.
is.
Yeah.
So,
Now, we're not talking about whether they're attached or detached, we're talking about whether the secondary suite can be used for short-term rental.
Okay.
So we're not talking about size, and we're not making, we're not reviewing the distinction between attached or detached secondary suites.
So if someone had a secondary, a detached secondary suite, let's say on Lenora neighborhood, could that now be a short-term rental according to this policy?
No.
No.
No,
So you haven't, okay, so you're not recommending that the secondary suites,
not in the current draft, but it is, I'm bringing it up because we're getting a lot of feedback, and it's a good point for discussion. If the committee would like to recommend a change to the draft to allow for short-term rental in secondary suites, that's something that the committee can definitely do.
that's where all of it's
Yeah,
happening.
staff has-
Well, if
staff
you don't
has
include that,
definitely
you'll have,
considered-
everybody will be in contravention.
but
Staff has definitely considered including the use as part of the seasonal rental use, so still capping it at 120 days out of a year, and still requiring the same licensing requirements and good neighbor agreement, but to actually allow it in the secondary suite. The background that I just gave was why secondary suites were allowed in the first place, was specifically with the restriction not to have short-term rental and to reserve it for long-term rental stock. So that's kind of the balance that needs to be considered.
and I guess a secondary suite is something that has a kitchen.
It's a fully contained dwelling unit.
Yeah, it's a fully contained.
As a limited, as a kitchen is defined in this, which is a plug-in stove, a mini fridge.
No, as a full kitchen.
Okay.
So the
that has a
limited,
stove.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
the limited kitchen definition was also brought in here to give clarity to what is allowed in a
Look
bed
at
and
the
breakfast.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so if you have this, you would not necessarily be considered a secondary suite, and you can have this with a bed and breakfast.
So bed and breakfast can happen in an accessory building under the rules right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you could, in that accessory building, you could have a microwave and a mini fridge and a small sink,
Yes,
which is perfect for people traveling with kids.
yes, and not be considered a secondary suite.
Not be considered, yeah.
Okay, so in the interest of time, so that's the full.
Now I'm done.
Thank you, Emma, that's very informative.
And just put up the recommendation there.
Yeah.
Can I read what I have?
So well, let me just clarify
Can
what
we do
we're
some
gonna
more
attempt to
questions?
do here first. So in this, just so if I'm understanding what we're aiming for here, in this meeting, we're attempting to tabulate what Stef has as our list of questions and concerns, and then we're going to make a motion on our recommendation to council, or do we want to just, because we've gone over time in the meeting,
Yeah.
we're running out of time. I don't know if we have enough time to fully hash through our list, or do we want to just try to laser focus and do it?
She needs this
Do you need
feedback.
that list today
Yes.
from us?
The committee of the
council or
whole
just-
to review the feedback is set for the 20, I got a calendar invite.
And
Yes.
needs the list today.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna propose that we do is item by, let Steph read her list without saying anything. And then item by item, without voting on a motion, item by item, we'll do a show of hands of support for each item.
Can I ask
And
one
then,
more
and then
question?
we'll narrow down from that.
Can I ask one more
Yeah.
question? I was under the impression from the presentation at council that if I was somebody, my Bowen house was my second residence, that I couldn't rent it out for the 120 days because it wasn't my principal residence.
We have no principal residence restriction.
Okay, because I totally misunderstood that from the presentation at council.
That was considered, but it wasn't practical for Bowen because there's so many residents
Yeah,
who they're not.
okay, so,
Could I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Just a variation on what
Yeah.
you proposed? That rather than making a recommendation where we all agree on everything, that we provide a statement that says something along the lines of, the Community Economic Development Committee provides the following feedback.
yeah.
And all of the points
Yeah.
that have been identified in the course of discussion.
Right.
Because that's gonna go into the hopper,
Yeah,
and then there's gonna be more talk.
Yeah.
And then there's gonna be a draft, and then
Yeah.
there'll be more talk. It's more important to do a brain dump.
yes,
of
let's
everything that's
do that, but I guess what I'm hoping to do is, without making an official motion, get a sense quickly, without a lot of discussion, of whether people agree with the different points or not. So, because that way we can see if we seem to be in agreement or not, and if we need more discussion on some of the points, without having.
But you're just saying any comments that
But
each
if
of
they're
us would like to
concerned
have
to
should
have
go
the
on
committee, I
record.
think it should go.
Because we're
on
not all going to agree.
Yes, absolutely. So let's start doing what I'm proposing and see what happens, and if it's not working,
And
then
can
sure.
we see it? Would that be,
Yeah.
can you put it on the screen, please?
Yes. Okay, that's.
Essentially what we did in housing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
give me a quick sec.
Well, do that, I'll go get it.
Because we are being asked whether we support, or are we just being asked for feedback? The
Feedback.
current
We're being asked
policy.
for feedback at this point.
Things have changed, we don't need to support it or
Yeah.
not, we just need to tell them what we want it to look like.
Right.
Oh, because that's where you have that wording, right, that we support it and we have feedback.
Well, I can take it out if you don't.
Well, I think we support
Rest of the
developing
project.
short-term rental regulations, whether.
Yeah,
That-
yeah, we
that
can
would-
clarify that.
I think that's as fair support. And then,
Well, that says we support it as presented.
Yes,
It
okay.
means the document that's today, like I'm just
Yeah.
dating the document.
yeah, so,
We,
The
we,
version.
so what we want to say is that we support the draft of
no, but
a
we've got,
short-term rental policy for Bowen Island, do we want to say we support this draft?
well, but if you're supporting the draft, you can't provide comments on things you want to have changed.
Yeah, so
So-
we support the process.
Support the development.
The
The
development.
development of
Sure.
short-term rental regulations and policies.
Yes,
Support the development.
regulations and policies, yeah, as opposed to the policy. Get rid of draft. And it's not a capital S, but just a generic short-term rental policy.
We've got policy.
Yeah,
Yeah, and just to clarify, the policy is to guide the regulation, so it's
Right.
more redundant.
right. Okay, right, of course.
And then take out as presented.
Well, but we support both, the policy and development of the further
Yeah,
regulations.
And take out as presented, because we're not, that's referring to
Yeah.
the specific policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And provide the following comments, yeah.
Okay.
There was something going on there. You guys want a clarification? I think, did you want something changed or?
You're talking about the first point?
No, I think that with enforcement.
Okay, so let's just go through point by point.
Can you make it a bigger font
Bigger?
somehow, Steph, so we can read?
So why don't I read the first one as it is? That clarity is provided. That clarity is provided on the variety of forms of rental accommodation: bed and breakfast, retreat center, guest house, short-term rental, seasonal rental, and others. So are there others?
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you want to say the definitions? Right, there is
I
right on
think,
the
I think clarity
definitions.
is good. Definitions are clunky.
Okay.
It's really to provide information.
Okay.
Yeah.
And should we add to that around
It's not rental
rezoning?
accommodation, it's vacation rental accommodation, it's visitor
Yeah,
accommodation.
that's short-term.
Short-term,
Yeah,
STR.
Well, that's already,
no, but you're talking about forms of rental accommodation, we're talking about short-term, forms of visitor accommodation.
That's a visitor.
And visitor means short-term. Take out rental. Yeah, there we go.
Actually, that was not what I was originally proposing.
No.
I was
Okay.
talking about accommodation, generally.
Understanding all the different.
So it would
Yeah.
include secondary suites, it would include,
Oh,
for
okay, so just use
example,
the word
fixed
accommodation
fees.
then, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's put secondary suites for sure in there.
Okay, got you.
And do you want to also there include the options for temporary use permits and rezoning?
How about we say that if we're just flagging the pieces of the policy, we don't need to go into that. We say that the option of temporary use permits or rezoning is supported.
For commercial guest accommodation or the,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think currently, if you did try to, realistically, if you tried to rezone a residential property into a commercial guest house kind of thing or whatever, my guess is, good luck. Right, so it's not really an option. I mean, technically it's an option, but realistically it's gonna happen.
I guess then the question is it actually supported?
I don't think we can say that.
I don't think
I
we can
don't
say
think we
that
should
either.
say that. I think
No.
that
Yeah.
the idea here was that we just.
Well, we have to highlight it, Vaune, because if it's intended to be possible and it's not possible, then that needs to be highlighted.
But it is possible.
But wait a
Whether
minute,
it's
that's
feasible
part of
is
the,
another thing.
that's part of the already land use and regulations, right? Why are we even addressing that?
Well, I totally get what you're saying, and that's why it wasn't explicitly in this policy, because it's an existing process, there are existing uses, you've
Yeah.
always had that option.
Yeah.
We lightly touch on it under the land use bylaw and saying more intensive use may be permitted under the land use bylaw as commercial uses such as commercial guest accommodation, guest house, or inn. But we don't explicitly say through rezoning or a temporary use permit.
So maybe it's something like that the community be aware of
Yes.
the option of.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then that's not saying anything about whether they're likely to.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the policy.
Doesn't have to go on the policy, but it's.
But the policy could offer council some direction as far as the preference between a temporary use permit or a rezoning. Because staff would recommend temporary use permits.
so the zoning, the proposal to allow a whole house as a commercial guest accommodation, oh, sorry. It'll go away. Is, go away.
I don't think that that's actually a
No,
separate
but-
thing. I think it's under, we're still under number one, which is, we need clarity on all the different forms, and what comes along with that is existing, would be useful for people to be pointing out, so, okay, here's what our current bylaws say, and regulations that go along with this. So that's part of
Yeah.
the clarity of
But there's
understanding.
clarity on the third bullet too, so the first three bullets are all about clarity.
Yeah.
But I agree, the
Yeah.
background to the policy should make it clear what the current options
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
and what this policy is
Okay.
intended to address.
or the plan is intended to address.
Okay, so let's
Still
just
in
leave,
trouble.
let's leave the permits and rezoning for a second and get into the enforcement structure.
So I think when we were talking about enforcement, there was the current one that's proposed, which is more lenient, I suppose, and it would be on an issue basis, trying to resolve the complaint through a warning and then finally a notice. Whereas the other alternative is really just 3 complaints, period, doesn't matter what issue it is. And you get to the warning, you get to the notice, and you're done. So I think it's just how strict do we want to be in this enforcement process?
I think, what I don't understand is why there, and maybe you already clarified it by saying it's a separate bylaw, but why penalties, financial penalties? Because I see a cost to the municipality for enforcement that is not being
Definitely.
balanced.
So part of this policy actually calls for a separate business license for seasonal rentals. And part of that fee will also consider more enforcement costs associated with that type of license. but we are also asking for a deposit
Mhm.
to pay for any future enforcement costs.
Mhm.
If you don't have any, you will get the deposit back. So it's kind of an incentive to,
When would you get the deposit back?
when you not renew your license.
Okay, so essentially you, as long as you're in business, you would have a deposit. Interesting. Okay, so one way of doing it would be that, which of course was loading upfront cost to every good person who's going to run a perfect thing. And one of the intentions of the business licensing was that the license be kept simple and low cost, the licenses themselves. So it seems that we're complicating it by giving different fees to short-term rentals and so on. If that's what's being considered, especially with the deposit,
Well-
it'd have to be managed.
Yeah,
What's your business
that's all going
license
to be
fee?
brought back to council
Mhm.
for
What's the
consideration.
deposit for?
They're considering the possibility of including a deposit
To
for
cover any enforcement costs,
violations.
if there are.
But there aren't, like, for instance, right now in the noise bylaw, is there a financial penalty or are they just
Yes.
warnings?
Yes,
Is
there
there?
can be, yes, there can be, there is legislative fines
Okay.
already, like in the bylaw. For the bylaw notices for short-term rentals, that fining structure will be brought to council for review. So right now, there's nothing established, but there will be fines established. And the biggest fine will be operating a short-term rental without a license.
Right.
So for me, Emma, to be able to evaluate the regulations and the policies, I also need to know what the fee structure is. I think doing that after the regulations have been adopted, it doesn't make sense to me, because considering what the fees are, what the penalties are, and so forth, I need to know what they are.
At this point, the policy is proposing that there will be a fee. Once that is adopted, then staff will put in the time for drafting the policy, the regulation, the amendment to the fee bylaw, and doing the research and bringing that back to council.
So what we'd be adopting down the road is that we're going to proceed with this plan.
With the implementation,
Yeah,
as part of the implementation, there's the amendments to the land use bylaw, which is the uses, the definition of the uses, amendments to the business licensing bylaw, the requirement for a business license, establishing the licensing fees, amendments to the
Great.
bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, so establishing penalties. It's all set out as part of the implementation of the policy step by step.
I understand that is what you're proposing. I don't agree.
so you want to know what the penalties are going to be and the fees are going to be
Yeah.
before we even go into drafting anything?
No, I want them to proceed concurrently, because I think they're
Well, I think,
of a piece.
but that's what I thought Emma said, that once council says, yeah, this is the general direction we want to go, then they'll develop the fines and fees bylaw concurrently with the actual amendments to the land use bylaw and the development of the formal policy that we'll accept as a policy.
I mean, all of these amendments, they all work together. I mean, you're amending one thing, giving it a use, you have to regulate the use through the business licensing, through bylaw enforcement. If council does not want to adopt this entire approach, staff is not going to spend time making all of the amendments, do you know what I mean? Because they're all tied together.
Yeah, I get
If the
that.
approach needs to be changed, then we would have wasted all of that work.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that the fees and the penalties,
Okay,
from my
so-
perspective, are part of the consideration of the regulation.
Let's make sure it's reflected in it, and then we've got
And I'll let
to.
it go.
I mean, I think part of my hang-up with this whole thing is this paper is a plan for proceeding, not a policy.
Yeah, okay,
And
but we need to make sure our feedback is accurate here, so let's just look at what we've got. So Stef is retyped here. We said that the enforcement and fees and fining structure are clarified and are developed concurrent to the policy.
Yeah.
So that's our.
Well, it's not, there's going to be amendments to the regulations, that's not policy. There's going to be an enforcement policy developed,
Yeah,
or the good neighbor policy.
Yeah.
And those will be accepted by council as policies. So it's as the regulations and the policies are developed.
Regulations.
This is meant to be policy to guide enforcement.
It's the plan, but only part of it is the policy to guide enforcement. The regulations are regulation amendments.
Can I ask something, please?
6 minutes.
Since we're talking about revenue in this case, I can't remember now, I understand that the municipal regional district tax is being considered. What, is it being recommended as part of this draft policy?
Yes.
Okay, so, and that can only be assigned because it comes through Destination BC to our tourism?
Or to
Or
affordable housing,
affordable housing?
but nothing to
But
fund the
those two.
process. Yeah.
Okay, how is that going to be decided, how that money is used?
Council decides the split.
But what we could say here is that we support the introduction of the MRDT.
I would absolutely say so, and,
Yeah.
you know, I think both of those things, but, you know, because now we're gonna get down to 120 days. How well attended was the public session that you held? I know I was invited to one. There was like months ago,
Public information session or the workshop?
either.
The information session was not super well attended, it was less than 10 people.
Okay,
And the workshop was very well attended,
like what?
20-something people.
Okay, because my concern here is that we know we have 120, there was a number earlier, 120-something operators on the island, and you got 7 letters from people, and a total of 30 people face-to-face, right?
Well,
Yeah.
more than 7, I just said 7 specifically had an issue with the
I see, okay.
date limit.
My concern is that we're not hearing from the people that are being affected by
Okay,
this.
so let's write that concern, and I don't want to cut anyone off anymore. However, we're at
Well,
time in our meeting and we need to make, so I need to know if people are going to be able to stay
Okay,
over on.
what are the
Hang on,
reasons?
Vaune, hang on a second. I need to know if people are going to be able to stay over and we're going to have a quorum to be able to make this motion today or not. So before we go any further, what are you gonna say?
This is Natasha. Sorry, I have to be off the phone in about 8 minutes. And I do hope we get a chance to address the fact that during the Royal Island Economic Forum, that's on the 8th, and so is our next meeting.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. We will,
If Natasha has to get off the phone, is there any comments or questions she needs to raise?
I, to be honest, don't know enough about the short-term housing to put in too much of a comment. So I'm happy to follow along more, but yeah, I don't know enough to make a huge decision about it.
okay, thank you very much for
Oh.
calling.
Thanks, Natasha. Okay, so before we discuss our points, we're just collecting feedback. So if we have more feedback, let's make sure that it's just written down there.
I'm
Wait a
cons-
minute.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay,
okay.
so go ahead. Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay, I'm worried about the engagement, but now we get to the reasons behind the 120 days limit are articulated in our communication piece.
Okay, so hang on a second,
Yeah.
before we move on. So you talked about engagement, and you made specifically, you're concerned about low uptake on the
Okay,
engagement
I don't need
process?
to make that a point right now. That's just, I don't need that to be recorded. I think you have more public engagement.
There's an open house plan.
Coming in
but-
part of the process of, okay, let's see what happens.
Okay, so just the,
Part of what I was just talking about is, I'm getting to the 120 days point, okay?
well, hang on, or do we want to delete the, no,
Yes,
we support,
delete it.
oh, yeah, okay.
Yes,
I
well,
don't-
there is an open house plan as part of the process.
Yes, so I don't, I.
We just
I'm
want to
not
make
gonna
sure
bring
that it's really well advertised so that the people that are
Okay.
affected are going to come to it.
Okay, let's say
that.
that.
I was really, that comment
So
was to support what else I was going to say about the 120 days.
Okay, I sorry to keep, I want to make sure that our points are done so we can just move on. So it's not
Yes, great,
actually
Great, perfect.
overall public engagement. You talked specifically about the engagement of the operators.
For the people that will be buying these licenses
Yes, not, but,
Or-
so we say public engagement, that's neighbors and everything else. Really, we want to make sure that we've
Yes.
heard from all the operators, right?
I would go back and we want all stakeholders. I mean,
All
Were there
stakeholders.
lots of other stakeholders at those meetings? No, I think we have to hear from all stakeholders.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it
okay,
is a good point.
okay.
So, we want the reasons behind the 120 days limit to be articulated in a communication piece, or better articulated.
Explained, yeah.
What are the reasons? Like, all we've heard so far is that Bowen wants to, what's the word, maintain the feeling of a residential neighborhood. But I feel like there's also, has municipality, you heard, again, this is my question, how many people you heard from, because is what you've been hearing, that our lack of long-term rental availability is also spurring this 120-day thing. Is that one of the reasons? Why 120 days?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking you, why, I can't even remember what the reasons
Nelson
were.
and,
The reason is the short-term rental for an entire house is meant to be for a house that's actually lived in part-time. It's not meant for a house to be used as short-term rental for the full year.
I don't understand
So
that.
if it's a full year, it's a commercial enterprise, so it's not no longer.
but why not
residential.
180 days? Or,
Yeah, why, like,
Yeah.
so I guess when I'm going back to this engagement is like, 120 days, what is that impact is going to do on, from a tourism perspective as well, where are the people gonna go and stay then? And so is that going to have an impact? If that is really limiting what goes on already, we don't really know that, do we, until we talk to these people? Then are we gonna have a huge impact on how many visitors come here when people are relying on that kind of revenue, right?
I think we don't know, is the bottom line.
Then why
And
limit
the-
it?
And the 120 days does not apply to the B&Bs, and that's an important point that I don't think has always been understood. If the 120 days limit refers to properties that currently, if they're renting, they're illegally renting.
Yeah,
So
but didn't you say that was roughly 80% of them? Didn't you have some figures earlier that said it was roughly 80% of them?
Of people that
everything's
are-
illegal right now if you're renting out your whole house, whether it's for 2 days
I know.
or.
So what I'm
She said
saying
that
is-
90% of the listings, of the 120 so listings, were full houses.
Right. So I'm saying,
But we don't know how many days those full houses are being rented
no,
for.
we don't. But my other point, all I'm gonna say here, I think that, I'm questioning the 120 days. I don't think we have enough information to, I'm happy, great with, maybe there should be a cap. But if it's also, again, to address housing rental affordability for long-term tenants, I don't see how, if you are renting your house out for 120 days a year, you're gonna have a temporary rental for, what is that, 4 months? So the other 8 months, and then someone has to leave. It does not solve that. So all I'm saying is, I don't think,
That's not the intent of it.
Oh, okay.
so it's not the intent,
Yeah.
okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's,
So the rationale behind the 120 and is a question for mine, and I don't know in your research if you looked at all the other communities. Are Nelson and whoever they,
Rosewood.
Rose.
Webstone, the only two that limit the number of days, or do others?
Nope, there's another one that limits it to 45 days
Yeah.
on Denman. And there's Hornby that limits it to May to September. And then there are 8 other municipalities that limit it to principal residents only.
So if you're doing all of summer, like if you live in town and you want to come here for all of the summer, for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, and maybe a couple weeks of spring break, and that's your amazing use of your life on Bowen, there's still more days.
Than the 120.
Yeah.
You also have the option of renting it for more than 30 days without any business license.
Yeah, but you're not going to rent it from.
So I
I
guess the
think
bottom-
there's an economic reason here.
Yeah.
If you limit it to 120, then it's really a toss-up. Do you go temporary, 4 months at most, or are you going for the full year? because 4 months will limit your income, which is probably comparable to a 12 months long-term rental. So as soon as you exceed the 120, the long-term rental potential will shrink because the people will just make more money by having 6 months instead of 4. So the decision, what it boils down to, do we want to limit the long-term rental potential for the advantage of short-term? That's what it boils down to.
But from my perspective, we've got a whole bunch of people who have a second home here, and they may be planning to retire in it in 5 years, and so renting it out short-term enables them to use it, but enables them to be able to afford to keep 2 houses going until they're ready to retire here. And then there's also the families that have inherited them, and they have to rent them out in order to keep the family property that's been around for 200 years. So the question to me more is, how many do we want on the full meal deal, long-term, you know?
I think that should
And-
require a public process, like through a temporary
Yeah.
use permit or rezoning.
That,
I don't know, I just I don't see what the
Okay, well,
problem is,
we've
what we already
got
have,
the,
so
we've got the point.
why put a number on it? Do you know what I mean?
well, that was gonna be another question I
If
was
you're
gonna
gonna
ask.
allow
okay.
it, allow it.
Hang on, I'm gonna cut off the
Yeah.
discussion here just for a second. If you wanna reopen it, we will, but, the point that we have made for now is that the 120-day limit is reconsidered, and that the reasons behind the limit of days are
Yeah.
articulated in the communication, please. So as long as that says what we're discussing here, I think we should leave it, and then, and now the next one, I'm not sure if we said that exactly or not, but
Probably not, I'm just taking notes.
we say the short-term rental use is allowed in secondary suites, but that it follow the seasonal rental limit. And let's just get rid of 120 days.
Can I throw out one about, can we find another name for it than seasonal? I mean, what's wrong with vacation rental?
Yeah, the discussion.
Or
was-
temporary rental or something, but,
The
Well,
discussion at the staff level was that the feedback we got is that the community does not want to be seen as a vacation community. So these are supposed to be residences that are part of the community that have part-time residents that.
but
live there.
seasonal implies only certain times of the year rather than at any time during the year.
How about that an alternative
Yeah,
term be found
Yeah,
for
that's-
seasonal rental?
Well, isn't
Yeah.
it short term? Isn't it short term rentals we're talking about?
but short-term also covers, is a broad definition that has a whole bunch of subcategories under it.
It does?
Well, bed and breakfast short-term.
That goes back to the first point,
Yeah.
that clarity be provided on how all
Yeah.
A
these.
guest house is short-term.
It's needing clarity.
Well, did we just make up
I think
seasonal
that'd be
rental?
very
Where's
true.
seasonal
No,
rental?
that's Devin's
What's
term.
proposed, it's not my term.
Oh, okay, all right,
It's just what's proposed in the draft policy.
okay.
I know I'm not on the committee, but could I throw one in?
Yeah.
I think we need some clarity around how many units we're actually talking about on the island.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really know.
Well,
Well,
you gotta
You could go on
guess.
Airbnb and count them.
Yes.
That's
That's
why we presented the data from host compliance. The
Yeah.
123 count was in January of 2019.
But that's bed and breakfast and,
I don't think
Things
many
with
are
full
are
kitchen.
technically, you know, by our rules, bed and breakfast. I think they're all,
well, some
like
of
you,
them are.
80%, yeah, but I'm saying small, right?
You have to be cautious with that number though,
Yeah.
because Airbnb defines whole house differently
Yes,
from
it does.
whole house.
Yes, it isn't
And
necessarily a
it's
whole
very hard to
house.
sift
Yeah.
through what.
You have to look at the pictures to figure it out. Yeah.
I'm concerned, actually what came up, allowed in secondary suites. Excuse me, just, no, I'm fine. We passed a bylaw allowing detached secondary suites on houses, on lots of 1 acre or more, or actually 0.9 acres or more. I'm concerned that that will go away, and because you said there's pressure. People want to be able to put detached secondary suites on lots less than an acre. Did you say there's
I did
feedback
not say
about
that.
that? Well, I would like to then ensure that .9 acres is stated. Because I can see neighborhoods like Tunstall, Deep Bay, where, people could build a secondary suite. And
It's not part of this policy at all to review the size of the minimum size of the lot.
it isn't.
Okay.
So
No,
it has,
not at all.
so it will have to be detached. Secondary suite would have to be on a lot that is .9 acres or larger.
Yes.
It will follow the existing regulations.
Okay,
Yeah, we're not proposing any change to that
okay,
regulation.
I just want to make sure of
Yeah,
that.
the only change to the detached secondary suite regulation is allowing for a bed and breakfast use in a house on the
Yes.
property that has a detached secondary suite.
Okay, but not in the detached secondary
No.
suite itself. Thank you.
Currently, no.
Perfect.
Can I say
Okay.
just one more thing, just really quickly? That in communications, like in our public engagement, communicating, that I think there might be a sensitivity for the people who are operating these things to feel like they're going to be what do you call it?
Targeted?
Targeted, and there needs to be, that communication needs to take that in consideration to try and engage people, because I think you need this info, we need the info, we need to hear from people, and so maybe something like, anybody who is currently operating,
Did you do a survey? How many people?
will not be taxed, will not be subject to current regulations if they show up
I
and,
do that.
I don't know, do you know what I mean?
But I get the point.
Yeah,
People have been
really
well
encourage
engaged.
people.
The online survey is over 400 responses,
Oh,
which is really
okay.
good for Bowen. We also had an entire island-wide mail drop, and we also reached all the property owners, those on and off island. Yeah, so there was very comprehensive engagement.
So where's the
But
summary
in
of the
terms-
engagement results?
There was a staff report to council.
But that wasn't,
That's on the agenda.
is that in
You already put it up?
not the one
Well,
that we,
hang on a second.
Finish
So
with
the
the-
engagement happened in May, so it was summarized to council in July.
that's the, that's not here.
What I think is being brought up right now is the engagement for the draft policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that we have a very extensive communication plan to promote this.
Can I add to the bullet point that I mentioned, per current regulations? So, short-term rental use is allowed in secondary suites per current regulation?
Well, it doesn't allow.
Yes,
No, properties that have a detached secondary suite
Could
are
have
not
B&B.
allowed a B and B
Yeah.
in the municipal house.
Attached or
That's-
detached?
That's not what
That-
it's
yeah.
talking about.
no.
Short-term rentals are not allowed in secondary suites, so it's contrary to the current regulation.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to review this point, like, who said that? Because I didn't remember us saying that short-term rentals should be allowed in secondary suites.
Well, right now, all.
Because we're making that recommendation.
Well,
as it's
okay,
written.
but right now, people have got houses that
Yeah.
have a secondary
Yeah.
suite in them, that have been there for years. They
Yeah.
didn't necessarily build it to
Yeah.
be, and they're renting those out as
Yeah.
B and Bs.
Yes.
As B&Bs is fine. if they
No,
live in
they're
the
not,
house.
because they have a stove in them.
But
And
that's,
a stove is what makes it, under, I think, the general definitions, a dwelling unit.
Oh.
And so if they may just unplug the stove,
yeah.
so people can't use it,
Right.
but
I guess I'm confused about this. So the intention of the policy is to only allow it in the main house, in the main part of the house? Which is like a B&B
The
actually.
intention of the policy is to maintain short-term secondary suites for long-term housing.
whether it's in your main house or in a
Oh.
detached building.
But
Because
to still-
otherwise, if you have, obviously if you're renting bedrooms in your main part of your house, that's the bed and breakfast, it's already allowed.
But
It's
that's
already
not a
allowed.
short-term
So
rental.
this doesn't do anything
That's not a
for-
seasonal rental. A bed and breakfast doesn't have a kitchen, so it's not a dwelling unit.
Okay,
The-
do you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're getting at.
The point is that currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, Emma, you're not allowed to have both a secondary suite and a bed and breakfast. You have to have one or the other.
Right.
So this policy is recommending a change to allow both where you can have a B&B in the home and still have a secondary suite. So there is
In the home or in the detached?
in the detached.
Yeah.
So there is a material change in allowing two types of rental units.
So my sense is that we need to say that we support
No,
that
I thought we
policy.
were making a point that we were saying they should be allowed in secondary suites because currently this policy says they're not.
Okay, so
I'm
if,
sorry,
no, that's fine, and so I think.
Okay,
the-
but
the-
secondary suites includes a suite in your home
Yeah.
and a
So you're
detached.
saying you can have the bed and breakfast upstairs and your short-term rental downstairs in the suite? You think that's what it says?
No,
Okay, so
No.
currently, if you have a secondary suite,
Yeah.
you cannot have a bed and breakfast anywhere on your property. The proposed
Oh, right, okay.
proposal
Okay.
is if you have a secondary suite, you can have a bed and breakfast, not in the suite, but in the house. What that
The
point is
suite could
saying-
be in the house though,
The
too.
suite could be in the house, but the bed and breakfast use can't be in the suite. What
So
that
it's
is
not
saying,
really
short-term
clear.
rental use is allowed in the suite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but your policy doesn't say that already.
No.
We are
So the
making that
policy is
recommendation.
saying to allow for bed and breakfast use in the house,
Yeah,
but still maintaining no short-term rental use in the suite.
okay, I'd like to take a gauge here, because Vaune, you've said that you think that the policy should recommend that there's short-term rentals in secondary suites.
I'm confused. I don't know if what you're saying is that you're restricting, you,
Right now, you are not allowed to do a
any
vacation
short,
rental.
doesn't matter if you're just living upstairs.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make
Yeah.
this very clear. You have a two-level home, you have your family living upstairs, you have your secondary suite downstairs.
You
It's
have
typically how it works.
A dwelling unit downstairs.
Yeah.
You have your secondary suite downstairs, okay? You're saying that the way this policy is written now, you can have your bed and breakfast upstairs if you want,
With your family.
you can have a long-term rental downstairs, but if you live with your family upstairs, and you don't rent out any rooms, that your secondary suite cannot be used as a short-term rental.
Yes.
That's what she's saying.
That's what-
So this goes back to
Okay,
the
then
point.
I definitely want that recommendation.
Okay, but now that we've clarified that, this is why I think it's important that, because this is going to be received by council as input for the policy, Vaune feels strongly that short-term rental use should be allowed in secondary suites. Do we as a group actually say that? Because if we don't, that's a pretty definitive statement and
Yes, it is.
recommendation.
Yeah, I would not agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so,
then you don't have any, you are actually
No,
effectively
no,
canceling
I
the
would
vacation
say
rentals on this island.
If we are economic development committee here,
Yeah.
what we need most is rental accommodation.
So
So
this-
if I have to choose between a renter who works on the island, we have nobody working for us. It's way more important than having a tourist coming.
But this is my point,
Yes.
Wolfgang. If this policy has been drafted to support, to address the lack of affordable long-term housing, then let's say that. Because then I think the conversation gets opened up into, does that really do that? Or are there other options to
No.
address the affordability
The-
issue? And let's be clear about what we're doing here.
There is not a competition, it's about 4 months short-term limit will make the owner of that space thinking, am I better off long-term or short-term? But it's not, I'm definitely going out for year-round short-term,
I
and that
understand
eliminates
that,
the
I
long-term.
understand that,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is
Oh.
80% of the units that are currently operating short-term rental
Yeah.
would not then be allowed under this new policy to operate at all, then we are effectively closing down the vacation rental business,
But
Well,
also,
sector
again-
here.
Again, to bring to the point of that 89%.
Maureen, you're looking at me, what do you think? Am I misunderstanding this?
can I throw in something?
Well,
Everyone's
okay,
talking.
before we throw anything
Yeah,
else in,
sorry, Emma.
this is an excellent discussion, and it could go on for
I don't
all
think the
afternoon.
committee can necessarily, I'm not suggesting,
Yeah.
So-
I want my comments recorded, but I'm not suggesting the committee has to all agree with me.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's the point,
You
is,
do like
so we
10
need to, if there, I kind of have the same opinion as Wolfgang, but that's my personal opinion, you have your personal opinion. we need to make recommendations to council, so we need to agree on what recommendations we're gonna make. And so we definitely, in reference to what Vaune is saying, which I appreciate, you know, we can't do this without a context of what's currently going on. And so how can we
Is
phrase
this recommendation to
that?
council or to staff? Like you can take
This
some
is
of
our
this
feedback,
It's our
that
feedback.
we'll summarize
on.
for
That's
council.
Yeah.
General practice.
Yeah. So, but that having been said, so
Could I-
definitively,
Could
yeah,
I
go ahead.
suggest
Maureen.
something? That we don't use that wording,
Yeah,
and that we say that further investigation of the use of secondary suites for short-term rental be considered.
Yes.
And that gets the point across that there's,
I think there's a complete disconnection there. Like, why make a policy that actually
Shuts down everything
shuts
that's
everything
going on.
down?
So
Okay,
what I was
you
trying to
made-
say
you
was,
made that point, and
Yeah.
that would be part of the further investigation.
I think that
Because
catches up with
we're,
Maybe that
we're
doesn't
we're
the case.
uncertain at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah.
You're certain,
Yeah.
you're certain.
and
I'm not
some of
certain.
this
and
I'm
what
not.
I'm trying to do
I'm
with
saying we don't have enough information, because if the
And that's what
anecdotal
that
information that we
says.
have says 80% of it would be shut down, then that concerns me.
yeah, absolutely, and it should concern all of us,
Yeah.
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 And the anecdotal information does not say that 80% of all short-term rentals on the island are in secondary suites.
It says that they're full residents, but we don't know,
Classified as entire dwellings under.
but we don't know
coastal
whether
compliance.
that's really a
We don't know
secondary suite or
exactly,
not.
but
But
that-
Yeah.
the definition is they got a door.
Emma, at the very beginning, there was a
So it may
statement
not be a
about
problem
priority to residential something.
Oh,
What was that wording?
residents first?
Yes, I think that has to be a point. of-
That's good.
Yes,
Like you would like to maintain that?
of course we do. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not Cancun. I just say no.
We're not Cancun.
No, not the philosophy, the principle. the
It's a guiding principle, it's a
of
guiding
residence
principle
first.
for the policy.
It's strongly supported.
Yes, it's strongly supported.
And can we add to that, our framework of community economic development, saying that we need to consider it in the context of resiliency and diversity in our community?
So,
Okay, I was
there
gonna say-
are a whole bunch of people operating right now. They have their family living upstairs, they have a suite above the garage, which is maybe connected to the house or not, or they have a suite in the basement that's been there for years. And they're renting them out and they're calling them B&Bs because they're not really encouraging people to cook. So those people are going to carry on because they're not going to rent out that suite long-term. They're going to disconnect the stove and remove it and put in a smaller fridge. That's the choice they're going to have to make. And that's the choice they will make because their family comes and stays in it at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Their grandmother comes for the summer.
Yes,
You
that's
know,
why
they are,
diversity doesn't necessarily
Can I just
solve
take
the
Yeah.
affordability issue.
Poll before the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
How does this committee feel around allowing secondary suites for short-term rental use as part of the seasonal rental definition? We can change the name of seasonal rental, whatever, but that it be rolled in as if you want to be able to do a short-term rental use of your property, it doesn't really matter, like not to make the distinction whether it be your house or your secondary suite, but you have a cap of 120 days, it could be anywhere on your property.
Yes.
How
We
does
don't-
it
we
feel?
Well,
already
that's-
said we don't- 120
that's the
days is
difference
the-
between what Wolfgang's saying, that anybody who has a secondary suite in their house should have it as long-term rental. I
just
think,
don't think you can ask people,
No,
force them to
you-
do that.
I'm not saying that, but you have to decide if you go short-term rental, then it's limited to 4 months.
okay, that's
So
fine,
it's
those
then-
people will be quite happy with
Yes.
that,
Yeah,
most
and
of them.
that's, but then you leave the choice to the owner. But if the 4 months limitation would now extend it to 6, then it's clearly that we will lose long-term secondary suites because people then
Economically, it's not
rent it.
enough.
Well, I guess
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
think
saying
The
is,
economics are important to people on this island. A lot of people
but
are
I'm
paying
saying
their
there are a whole
mortgages
bunch
with-
of them that
with
would
that
never
extra
put
income.
them in a long-term rental pool, ever,
Ever.
even if it's.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're getting too much.
Okay, so have we, it sounds like the clarification that was just made was that if that Allison made, I think, that you can take your fridge out and essentially decommission your
stove.
secondary suite.
Yeah.
Your stove. So we need, again, that's an information piece that people need to know. They need to know that they're not just gonna be cut off from being able to short-term rent their secondary suite. They
The
need to know
unit
that
that's
they're going to have
labeled
to
as secondary
comply
suite now.
with
Yeah.
secondary
Well,
suite.
what Anna said, that we're actually suggesting it doesn't matter what
Piece of your house.
piece of your house.
Yeah.
Don't
I think
make
there
a
needs to be some more discussion
make a
at the open
distinction.
house
Yeah.
on this whole,
Yeah.
So is that covered in our recommendations already for clarity, or do we need to have another point? Is what I'm saying about the secondary. So we say further investigation of the use of secondary suites for short-term rentals be pursued. So that covers it, doesn't it?
I just want to take the temperature of
Yeah.
on that point.
Okay, so
I think the temperature of
how
the
can we-
committee is the
how can
temperature of the
we-
community.
It's so complicated, isn't it? Because there's so many different
Well,
variations.
I mean,
of use.
I just know
Yeah.
from talking to people, because every time I,
Yeah.
run into somebody that I know has one of these units in their house,
Yeah,
and I sort of talk to them and say, well, would you ever consider renting it out long-term?
yeah.
And I get a very flat, no way.
It's a completely different
And
thing.
so there's the entity that wants to use the house really as a commercial guest accommodation, and the others that are really renting out that suite more as a B&B than as a secondary, as a vacation rental.
Oh, okay, so Maria.
I'll be happy to share some of the feedback from the Housing Advisory Committee. But I think the committees were asked to provide this feedback separately. And I think we kind of have to just draw a line under this, and this is the feedback we've got at this point, and send it forward.
Yeah.
And as I said, I can,
I mean, you can say the
Outside of the
committee was
context.
divided or something,
Yeah.
but I
at
think
the
the
meeting, I
comment.
can share a little bit more.
Yeah,
What you're
so
saying is you guys are
to
venturing
answer
into
Emma's
areas
question, I
that's
think
already
we
covered by
have,
housing.
sorry, to answer Emma's question, I think we have to ask you to rephrase it, because the secondary suite thing, I don't think we can answer that question right now. But do we support, could we
We're
answer your
saying
question?
further investigation, I think that's okay, right? That leaves it
That
as,
addresses
you
this.
understand
Yeah,
the context of it from hearing it all.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm comfortable.
we say residents first, right? That's, and I think that maybe addresses your point, because the intention of secondary suite regulations to date are to support residents. And we support residents. But this whole mash has to, as long as it comes out in a way that supports residents, then it could be, we're not sure whether it allows
So
short-term
a
rentals as
follow-up question.
secondary suites or not.
So when people have come and applied for business licenses, a bed and breakfast, and staff have gone out to look at the unit, how many of them have they found that have had a kitchen in them, so they fit into the definition of secondary suite? And
Has
therefore
staff
they
been
haven't
doing that?
got. They go and look at this,
Oh.
yeah.
Yes.
So I think
Licensing.
that's an interesting piece of
Yeah, and
information.
definitely a lot of units have been found to essentially be secondary suites unknowingly to the owner.
Yeah.
And
then they don't
I
get a
don't have an
B&B
exact number, but it
business license.
happens a lot.
So
Okay. Okay, so can we we need to make some sort of motion for this, these are our recommendations, right? Just a
Well, I
generic.
think the controversial ones have been made general enough
Yeah.
that we could.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, and members provided the following feedback,
Yeah.
and that leaves it a little bit
Yes.
more open,
Okay,
that we
okay.
didn't all necessarily agree.
So our motion is the Community Economic Development Committee support the development of regulations and short-term
short-term
rental
rental.
policies and provide the following.
And members provided the following.
And the
feedback.
members.
Yeah, and,
But the committee doesn't. The
Yeah.
members
Yeah.
don't.
and the members provide the following feedback.
And members provided the following.
And
Yes.
then the tax, well, presuming we still have an industry that the tax collected support affordable the building of affordable housing.
Well, again, that falls under
Well, that's the
whole
MRDT
residents
tax.
first thing, doesn't it?
Right, okay.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, Steph, I
Well,
would like to
shouldn't say that.
include.
Tourism will probably want a piece of that.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
think the
The
MRDT should
economic
be split.
development.
You can't use it for
Should be
all
split.
affordable housing.
through building
That's a debate
resiliency.
for a later day.
Yeah. That'll be an interesting one.
I think that's great.
Yes.
I think that's feedback.
Okay, great. So, in favor of sending this feedback to staff for council?
Sure.
You started an emotion, really, we're just all in favor of
I'm
something.
now ready for lunch.
Wolfgang, are you in favor? I didn't see your hand.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much for taking extra time to
Thank
get
And thank you.
very
you.
thorough.
This is a complex issue.
Yeah.
And to be frank, I think we need to make it as least complex as possible so that the public understands
Yeah.
what this all means. Because we've gotten this, you guys have been in meetings,
Yeah.
and there's still a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
We need to be very clear what this means.
When you do your open house, are you gonna put some information in on the feedback you got on the survey and the workshops?
I think I'll make it available online and also in print form. But
When somebody comes to an open house,
yeah, if
they
they want to
should,
look at the background.
there
Yeah.
should be maybe one board that has that and gives them the backup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the focus will really be explaining all these differences.
Yeah,
that
but I
you
think
find.
And next month, there's no quorum.
Yeah.
For those that wanna know what
What do we do
anybody.
with the rest of the
what-
agenda?
Yeah,
Well,
Sorry?
the budget has got,
For,
we gotta do the budget discussion.
it's got timelines.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Budget.
We've already done 8.1 because Joan briefed us earlier.
Yeah, all of the updates and subcommittee reports can be deferred.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the
Okay, where's your budget? Have you got numbers somewhere?
I don't have anything.
Oh, page 16 to 18.
I don't have anything new. That was just from last year provided.
So we don't need to update the newcomers guide, do we?
Nope.
not in the coming year, no,
Community profile's been printed?
should be.
Or do we need, it doesn't need, yeah, because the census hasn't changed, so it wouldn't.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was great.
Thank you.
No, that's just a straight reprint.
Yeah. So the buy local campaign would be a carry forward for next year, for 2020. We want to do that every year.
Yeah.
Education and courses ongoing, what does that mean?
It doesn't, it's not the timeline. It's not going to happen spring, winter, fall. It's just when the opportunity
But you've
arises.
got $0 in the budget.
We took things out of that and speakers and
Okay, well, we
delegations.
need to put it back in for 2020 then.
Yeah.
Yep.
What would be a reasonable amount for council?
What did we have there before? I didn't have the draft. Sorry, Rob, we just went right into budget.
Well, when did we take it out to fund? We took it out to fund something.
We
The
took
rural
about
forums.
the
Okay, so
initial-
let's put the $2,000 that's in the rural form back under engagement and courses.
Okay, so
What was there initially, I believe, was 1,000?
Oh, okay.
Because we took 1,000 from education courses and 1,000 from speakers and delegations. But I think that it would be appropriate to put 2,000 in there because we're not going to be redoing, as we said, the newcomer guide will be done and we won't be doing a new version of the community profile. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, by education and courses, is that education for the community or is that?
it's usually sending a member to a VCEDA event or a
Yeah,
conference
yeah,
or
okay.
a course, pay for
Well, some
webinars.
might be annual, so.
Yeah, I think with regards to the Rural Island Economic Forum, that there will be more worthy things for our delegates to actually attend. Like, we haven't been going and attending events.
No, but we can put 2,000 in the education and courses and still leave 2,000 for if there's an ongoing rural economic
Yeah.
community forum.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could leave this and have Rod and Stef put together a draft and just circulate it.
Mhm.
Because this has been a long meeting.
Yeah, it
and
sure has.
I would rather
But
give
But this
myself-
feedback has been really good, if you guys are,
It is, okay, so
So we
can
don't
do
need
that?
initiatives because
Yeah.
it's already
Yeah.
as written.
Yeah, but we're tinkering right now. We
Yeah.
need to think.
Yeah, but are there any initiatives? Well, we still got Helen's economic
Okay,
development
we'll
plan
just
to
put
go
something
too. We
together
don't even
and-
know.
Yeah, and I think Helen's budget is separate from ours.
it's totally separate.
And,
But that's only developing the plan.
yeah,
So is there anything that's gonna come out of the plan that we would want to implement in 2020 is what I'm.
Yes.
Okay, so Rod, Helen, and I can meet next week,
Yeah.
come up with the draft, send it to you guys for input.
Yeah, because I'm
I think
thinking
that's a good
initiatives
idea.
Okay.
might be changed to implementation of
Yeah.
items from the economic development plan.
Yes.
So we're gonna have to defer the 2020 business summit discussion for now, I think. Just with the fact that we have gone over.
Yeah.
And VIAC, is there one point that you wanna
No, not right now.
make? Okay. And so, just flipping back, so we've done business engagement, the digital roadmap, Kristen isn't here, and I think we'll just have to leave it.
One working group, the community story working group has officially disbanded. I
Right.
put out a, so,
Okay.
Thanks for your work on that. I hope that will come back around in a different iteration or form.
well, we've got ways to make it happen.
And as for the Rural Island Economic Summit, I don't know what the briefest way to update is on that, but there is a lot, of course, that's going on right now as it's getting closer, coming up. in
Well, all the
November.
registration and information's on the their
Registration
website, yeah.
information is now on the website, it's been updated, there's a Facebook page now. Joan, are you attending? Have we identified someone from tourism?
We
to
don't
attend?
have any budget to send anyone, sorry.
What did we decide about trying to get to reach out to more people?
If you're on this committee, we can put that under the education. So that's
For next year.
for next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, for next year, yeah, I'm.
It would
I already-
certainly be, out of the people that are going, you know, we need to have a discussion with tourism prior to the forum, I think.
Who's going?
I think right now, that it's Natasha, Helen, and myself. Vaune, are you registering for the forum?
I'm close.
Possibly Vaune.
Committee.
And I don't know if any other groups are sending anyone off.
Jay Mather's.
Is Jay Mather going?
Yeah,
Okay,
Jay's
great.
going for sure,
Okay.
and Natasha's going for
Yes.
sure.
Oh, and Robin is going.
And
Robin's
well,
going.
Robin
Did
Fenn
she
is going.
contact you? Because Natasha was wondering if Alistair could be invited.
And Alistair is, I don't know if he's going to the forum, but he is, I don't know, he may have registered, but he is going to
She wanted to
Quotes
go there
Cove.
Yeah.
with him, yeah.
So, and we're funding you and Helen out of our budget.
That's right,
Okay.
and everyone else has.
Isn't Helen going on her own budget?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that counselor going?
no.
Okay.
I haven't, I mean, I was interested, but I just haven't.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess maybe the one thing that we need to be thinking about, and as a Rural Island Forum group, we can talk about this, but maybe we need an open house with the people that are going.
Well, not an open, or no. or-
With the island groups, the people who've been invited but aren't going, maybe we need to see about having our own little engagement,
Pre-engagement, so that we take the
pre-engagement,
issues.
just so we can update them on what we're doing, and then we can follow up with them afterwards. Because otherwise, like, we're not really making that connection with a lot of different groups involved. So, you know, and maybe, anyway, we can discuss that and propose it.
Maureen, did you get my email about Jessica Mills? I've been not being able to reach her. I was
Did we do
wondering if, I thought you said you
I'm
knew
sorry,
her.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Steph, do we have anything, okay, so I'm gonna jump off of that now.
While you're in the bathroom, I said we're not doing any updates or.
No
something
staff
reports,
updates.
sorry.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think we needed to just
Insubordinated.
quickly do that.
So the next meeting cannot be Friday, November the
No,
8th, because
so
that's the business summit, right?
Yeah, but
Is the business summit that day, that
Yes.
weekend, the
Yes.
long, so that's the
Yes.
long weekend,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just want to make sure that we do whatever we need to do for the budget and for the business summit for Christmas time, so November, we should meet.
Do we need to meet again then the week before? Like
The week before is housing, but the week after might be a great time, you guys will be all jazzed about the forum.
the week after?
Tell us all about it.
The week
Yeah.
after the forum.
So Friday, November the 17th.
The 15th?
Oh, the
The
15th?
15th?
Oh, something's wrong with the 15th, why don't I, oh, maybe that's something else.
Okay, I'm not gonna be here for that meeting.
Okay. You should be,
Yeah.
since you were on the,
Yeah.
you need to be at the meeting.
Yeah.
Does that have to
So
be a
Friday,
Friday?
November 22nd?
I won't be here for that either. I'll be here for,
We need
Oh, you're
another
going
call.
away.
you know.
Well, Do we?
Does everyone have to do Fridays?
That's
Is that a
gonna be
work
my
from home
next
day for
question.
people, or can we do other days of the week?
Go with the days of the week.
Where are you gone from?
Yeah,
Did we pick
Yeah,
Fridays
I-
because that
it's
was
not
Chris
gonna
and Mike,
happen.
is that work on the island day?
17th.
possibly.
I think, no,
But I think we're,
the 12th, 12th to
Oh,
24th,
I don't want to do that, get back to that.
So, what, and you're back Wednesday?
the 24th.
What day is that?
missed that.
We
That's
could
a
do the
Sunday.
29th then.
Or we could do a Monday, that following Monday.
The 9th is a holiday, the 11th.
No, sorry, we're talking about.
We're end of
the
November
end of
now.
November now.
But if we're off Friday, sorry, when do you guys arrive? I missed that.
I think, it'd be nice to do it after because of the forum stuff,
Yeah.
but maybe we
What
can
about
do it-
Tuesday, the 12th?
I think, for me, the only thing that would work is before.
Oh, okay.
November
The-
1st?
Okay, what about the
November 1st.
Wednesday?
Wednesday, November the 6th works for me.
That works super well for me.
No.
I'm gonna be traveling that day.
How about
over to-
Thursday, November the 7th?
And then we're at the forum.
What about Tuesday the 5th?
Tuesday the 5th?
Tuesday, November the 5th?
That could work.
Doesn't work for me,
Hmm.
sorry.
It's the 5th, yeah.
Monday the 4th?
There is a finance committee meeting already set for
That's at
that.
11:30.
No, I've got 4 o'clock.
Sorry, but it's not at 9:30.
Oh, so 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do that.
November 4th?
yeah, that's fine, the
I
day's
thought
already
you were
on
that
there.
What time?
Monday, November.
9:30?
Can you
I'm
do
sorry.
Monday this morning?
Hold on. Sorry?
9:30 in the morning?
No, I can't.
She can't, Maureen can't do Monday mornings, that's why I was referring to. Yeah,
I can't do some Monday morning.
oh, okay.
Halloween? Halloween morning?
No.
Morning.
Oh, the morning of the 31st?
Can do that.
So why are we having this meeting in November?
We need the business summit,
Okay, the business summit is in February. So when are you back?
and the budget,
And the budget, but we're gonna do the budget.
yeah.
We're gonna have to do the budget by
How
email.
was the first? First didn't work?
I can't do
How's
the
it
first.
today? Well, we could do it actually at noon on the 1st.
I cannot do the
One.
first.
I could do the 1st.
Can you?
Uh,
1 o'clock?
The first, yeah?
Yeah, let's do that. Do housing in the morning, EDC in the afternoon.
There you go, knock it all out.
Hopefully it can be a short
Yeah.
meeting
sending an
based
invite,
just on this.
I will move the existing meeting. So don't everybody touch their
Are you
calendars.
going to send it to us?
Yeah. And it's gonna go to, what did we say?
Friday, November the 1st, at what time?
1 o'clock?
Sounds good.
I'll phone in.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And, oh, yes, you should have it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Do we have time for, feedback on the meeting?
No.
No!
Do you know what time?
Okay, we'll do the 5, we'll do the fist of 5, from 1 to 5, whether it was useful or
Yeah.
Oh, I think the
it was a waste
discussion
of
we had
time.
on short-term rentals.
Okay, so
was
1 to
useful.
5.
But some of the other discussion was useless.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Joan.
Okay.
Wasn't that a lively meeting?
Okay, now, here's the choice you get now to go to these meetings or go to the dentist for a root canal.
I'm gonna leave this here.
Oh, they're kind of like all meetings.
Thank you for applying to Joan.
Yes.
Yes.
We want to be at the